This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Donald Trump needs a weak dollar.
Have we achieved a soft landing? Has the Fed kind of done its job?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Fears over a broader regional war in the Middle East.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. There's one story today. China catches up on AI. We've got a terrific set of guests for you. We'll get to Mandeep Singh in moments. Paul, you were deep into DeepSeek before last night at 6 p.m.
Exactly right. And so what I did is I went back to Bloomberg Intelligence, and we've got a technology analyst in Hong Kong, Robert Lee, is doing a really deep dive on this stuff last year in November, and he's got a big report. So we're going to get Mandeep Singh to kind of walk us through what we need to know, Tom, about AI and China. Bloomberg Intelligence doing the good work there.
And your commute today and across YouTube, we're not going to give you the gossip. It's out there. People have done a great job on it. We'll give you the market reaction. The VIX out to 21.53, but we're going to talk to pros. Lee in Hong Kong, is it Robert Lee?
Yep.
Robert Lee is electrical engineering, double E from Imperial College. Mandeep Singh is committed to be with us for 3 hours. And Anurag Rana will join us from Chicago. In addition, Saritha Rai will join us with her leadership from Bangalore today. I keep saying Deep State. It's not Deep State. It's DeepSeek, right?
No, and it's DeepSeek. And the NASDAQ futures, Tom, are down 4% today on this news about perhaps a cheaper source of AI, and that kind of upends some of them. You know,
the certitude of the CapEx
exactly
that's
right,
out there.
Tom. Exactly
the Dow down 1% right now. Again, the VIX 21.62. From the Interactive Broker Studios of Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Yeah, you said it, Paul. NASDAQ futures really getting hammered this morning, down 4%. They were down as much as 5%. This is that lower-cost AI model from Chinese startup DeepSeek, kind of raising some questions over the high valuations of companies like NVIDIA. That's putting the broad tech sector on track for a $1 trillion wipeout. Let's get to NVIDIA right now. Their shares down 11%. Now, if that holds, it could be set for its biggest drop on record in terms of market cap. Checking in with Broadcom, its shares down 13%. Even go to Europe, ASML Holding falling more than 8%. Now, it's not just NASDAQ futures that are feeling a little bit of a hit. S&P futures down nearly 2.5%, 148 points. Dow futures down about 1%, 437 points. We go to the two-year yield, 4.17%. Down 9 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.50%, and that's down 11 basis points. Now, all of this coming ahead of a big week for tech earnings for companies like Apple and Microsoft. In the meantime, we did receive earnings from AT&T. Their shares up about 1%. Fourth quarter results did top estimates. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. I usually don't do this, but I have a fancy technical structure and a weekly chart of NVIDIA. And at 125 right now, from a 142 down to 125, I'm through my long-term moving average, but I'm not anywhere near 2 standard deviation support, which is a 118. So I got a 125 on NVIDIA and 2 standard deviations down. For those of you on radio, I'm giving YouTube the south signal here. I'm down at 118. We now discuss, and we are thrilled, I'm really honored that he and his colleague Anurag Rana have committed to what we're doing today on YouTube around the world. Mandeep Singh joins us right now. Did you know what DeepSeek was before 12 or 18 hours ago?
I did, yes. And
so what did you know about them 2 days ago?
That it is a competitor in the LLM space. They've been training their own model, and it's used mostly in the East Asian region.
Okay, what I learned, thank you Zero Hedge for this, from Morgan Brown at Dropbox, is basically they've said, we're not going to be as perfect, as pristine as the others, out to 32 decimal points. We're just going to get it done out to 0.0000008 decimal points. Is that what this is all about? Is they're not going to be perfect?
I think there's more to it than just, using the fewer floating point operations than OpenAI and Anthropic and others. And look, in this case, they basically focused on hardware efficiency. using the hardware in the most efficient fashion. They had the benefit of all these LLMs being out there. They use Meta Llama as a reference point. It's another open source model. And they figured out a way to do this most efficiently than everyone else. I mean, everyone is focused on scale right now. They focused on hardware efficiency.
Paul, the llama at Meta, at Facebook, is the grandson of the original llama on Saturday Night Live.
Oh, there you go. All right, very good. Mandeep, you've got an analyst, Bloomberg Intelligence, in Hong Kong, Robert Lee. I'm reading his research literally as we speak. And for folks on the Bloomberg terminal, go to BI Go and check out, if you need to figure out what's going on with DeepSeek and what China's doing with AI, Bloomberg Intelligence has got the data and the research there. Can China support a real competitive AI environment? It seems like their government is more restricting some of the technology there.
Well, so now we know the export controls probably weren't as effective as they were supposed to be here, in terms of restricting the access to NVIDIA latest chips. And some people are saying they did use, the latest H100 chips, albeit they were not of the same scale as were available to OpenAI and the others. But look, we don't know the extent of the hardware that was used for training. All I can say, based on this, the fact that they have a comparable model in performance to the others, it shows that they clearly have a combination of algorithms and compute to compete with the others.
Let's do the financials. Are the revenue growth models that you and BI have of all these fancy AI people, are they now at risk?
Absolutely. I mean, look at OpenAI's O1 Pro model. They're charging $200 per month because it's the best model they have to offer. The fact that you have an open source model that is comparable to the model that OpenAI is charging.
Comparable? You're saying it's comparable.
I mean, it is. Yeah. I mean, look at the benchmarks. And that's why, all these models have common benchmarks. This is within 1 to 2 percentage points of that benchmark.
Well, I know you don't do buy, hold, sell, but are we going to sell here? Are we going to see Wall Street put a sell on NVIDIA? Can you predict that?
I mean, right now, the fact that Meta raised their CapEx on Friday, to me, earnings season is where we will find out what all these companies end up doing. So, all this has happened in the last 48 hours where Meta raised their CapEx, DeepSeek came out, it's suddenly everyone is going crazy.
Yeah, Paul, the president lined up with the son of Japan to do a ginormous tech deal as well. You okay over there? Are you looking at your betting pool?
I'm doing social here.
You're doing social?
Yeah.
Oh, my word, Lisa.
I'm doing that out.
The social pulse.
I'm saying take a look at that. So, Mandeep, what do we do here? As we think about AI, it's obviously from a technology perspective, it has been the story for the last 2 years at least. How do you think about it now? Has anything changed in the last 24 hours for you?
A lot of software companies will feel, they can do their own AI now and not having to rely on the big hyperscalers. Because the narrative was, if you can't spend upfront on CapEx, then you don't have a play when it comes to the foundational model layer. And so suddenly everyone feels empowered that they can do their own AI with this development.
I see NVIDIA, Broadcom, some of these big chip makers that have had such a huge run on the upside. They're down 10, 11, 12% here today. Is that realistic? Does that seem reasonable to you?
I mean, with semi companies, we know the risk is always that cyclical element.
Yep.
And if we are calling that this is the top of the cycle in terms of semi demand and estimates aren't going up anymore, then you will see this sort of stock reaction. But I go back to my point about Meta raising their CapEx.
Right.
Projects Target adding $100 billion.
We haven't talked to you about that. $50 billion.
Yeah.
Like they were Meta CapEx was $25 billion in 2019. Then it was $50 billion for this year. Now they're saying they're going to 65. I feel like when I look at those numbers, it feels like drunken sailor time. Did they have a real strategy behind that spending, or are they just saying we need to be in this game, we need to spend whatever we need to spend? Typical Meta type of spending.
Yeah, and I think there is that aspect where you want to be that front-end player when it comes to the LLMs. But in the case of Meta, the challenge, in addition to the fact that DeepSeek model is out there, is they don't have a cloud business. You look at Microsoft, you look at Amazon, you look at Google. They have a cloud business to monetize those GPUs. Even if, let's say, DeepSeek came up with a better model, Microsoft can use that capacity for inferencing on the cloud.
Right.
They can generate cloud revenue.
We're this Mandeep Singh, folks, at Bloomberg Intelligence. Anurag Rana in the 9 o'clock. Saritha Ray from Bangalore is well on this news here with the NASDAQ down 4%. The VIX out to 21.57. And to be clear here, you don't see the trauma
I didn't see that, Tom.
in the
VIX?
Dow Jones. Yeah, the Dow Jones Industrial Average down only 1%. We're going to be duplicative here. We're going to go over this in the 8, go over it in the 9 as well. Mandeep, what are the meetings like in Silicon Valley now? And I mean, these guys never get up before 9 a.m. But today they're going to get up at 6 a.m. their time. They're going to be rocking 9 a.m. surveillance time. What are the meetings going to be like at Google? What's a meeting going to be like for Zuckerberg?
Well, so I think, again, given these companies are reporting earnings next week, right now they have to figure out what is it that they relay to the investors in terms of the scaling laws. Like up until now, the biggest debate was, will the scaling laws hold in 2025? And based on this development, I mean, we don't need to talk about scaling laws.
Do they replicate what DeepSeek is doing?
Absolutely. I think they will use some of the innovations that DeepSeek has showed in their paper, and given they have open sourced it, my bet is everyone cares about hardware efficiency. Even if Microsoft is spending $80 billion on AI capex, they want to use that capex efficiently.
The smartest thing I've heard is from the technologist, Paul Sweeney. Your TED Talk on this.
Right,
Your TED Talk. You almost wore a tie to your TED Talk.
Exactly.
They're drunken sailors. I mean, that's the smartest thing I've heard.
No.
Do you see capex responsibility?
No, I think, I mean, to my mind, all this capex can be used, for the future, and it's quite fungible. It's not like laying a fiber network and, it's going to go waste. Compute is always used in some form. Now, yes, they may have overpaid for the GPUs. You could argue, hey, was it worth paying $30,000 for a GPU? Probably not, but still, this compute is still useful.
Mandeep Singh with us, folks. We're going to go around equities, bonds, currencies, commodities. Again, we're off 4%. No, sit down. You're not done yet.
Yeah, where are you going?
Where are you going? I mean,
Get you for 2 segments.
You should see he has an English breakfast on Mondays. Like it's a cute kind of thing. The bond market yields in big time, which you'd expect here. The Sweeney yield 4.18% in 9 basis points. The 10-year yield in 11 basis points. First thing I looked at, the real yield crushes in 10 basis points from a 2.20 to 2.10. Some of the angst there in the market. And what I look at, and it's not a good number yet, but the VIX 21.54. Not 30, but from 15 to 21, that gets your attention. Paul?
Mandeep, is the concern here the DeepSeek product could be as good an AI solution as what some of the Western companies are providing, but at a lower cost? Is that the bottom line here?
Yeah, I mean, look at the app stores. DeepSeek is the top app right now here in the US, and everyone is using it. Comparable to ChatGPT.
No, I don't mean to interrupt, but this is important.
Yeah.
Lisa Mateo's not using it. Tom Keene is not using it. An adult like you or Joe Weisenthal, who's knee-deep into this stuff. Good morning, Joe. Joe's not up yet. Okay. Joe Weisenthal is going to bring up DeepSeek and bring up ChatGPT of one of the different managed levels. Can you tell the difference?
Look, I mean, there is an element of personalization that these apps provide when it comes to asking the type of questions you're asking. But if you have a generic query, DeepSeek is going to give you an answer that's comparable to ChatGPT.
I'm looking, Tom, and Mandeep just mentioned
don't
it.
Tell me, you're on DeepSeek?
No, I Googled the top apps. Number 1, DeepSeek. Number 2, ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And number 3, Paramount Plus for Landman and for Yellowstone. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, we had a Landman weekend at home. I said Sweeney's like knee-deep into this.
Number 7, Fox Sports.
Yeah. Get
right.
one more in here. One more in here because Mandeep's coming back at 8.
What do you need, or what do you think you're going to hear from some of these technology companies next week as they talk about China, as they talk about this, what is it, DeepSeek thing?
Yeah, I mean, the whole aspect around CapEx and scaling laws and what to do with the latest GPUs. Are you spending more on training or inferencing? everything is on the table in terms of hardware efficiency now.
I have no idea what inference is. We inference that you're coming back at 8 o'clock, and this will be duplicative this morning. A clinic with Mandeep Singh of Bloomberg Intelligence. Thanks to our team working all night on this as this blew up in the
thanks for
evening
Mandeep coming in
hours.
early. I mean,
the Kansas City Chiefs won because they have DeepSeek.
Chiefs and Eagles. Is this the reduction?
It's a major redo. Yeah,
Okay,
it's like,
all right.
It's like
All right.
2 years ago. Thank you, Ari.
2 years ago. Thanks, sorry.
It's great. Well, the only thing they have in common is they
Saquon
both
Barkley.
hate
Holy
Dallas.
cow.
That's the only thing
Yep.
they have in common. I was rooting for Lions Bills. That only went so far. Futures negative 140, 2.3%. NASDAQ futures negative 3.9%. The Dow, away from AI, does better, a negative 1%. The VIX out 6.66 points. It's a devilish number, 21.51. With our non-AI news from New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Israel is allowing Palestinians to return to the heavily destroyed northern Gaza Strip for the first time since the early weeks of the 15-month war with Hamas, in accordance with the fragile ceasefire. Thousands of Palestinians headed north today after waiting for days to cross. The United Nations General Assembly has designated today as International Holocaust Remembrance Day. January 27th is the anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz concentration camp. The day will honor the 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust and the millions of others of Nazi persecution. Jocelyn Getchin-Kestenbaum is a professor of law at the Benjamin N. Cardozo School of Law.
This year is especially important because of the alarming rise in anti-Semitism and other forms of hatred and intolerance for minority groups around the globe.
Professor Kestenbaum. The White House is claiming victory in a showdown with Colombia over accepting flights of deported migrants from the U.S. hours after President Donald Trump threatened steep tariffs on imports and other sanctions on the longtime U.S. partner. The White House says it includes the unrestricted acceptance of all illegal aliens from Colombia on U.S. military aircraft without limitation or delay. And Super Bowl 59 is set. It will be the Eagles against the Chiefs. Philadelphia down the Commanders 55-23. Eagles head coach Nick Sirianni.
It's not the best groups of individuals that wins. You got to become a team. We got one more to go.
Meanwhile, Kansas City beat the Bills 32-29. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Okay, let's get this out of the way. I mean, is there, like, if Taylor Swift shows up, Lisa, help me here, head to toe, and Louis Vuitton. I mean, she shows up, and I mean, is there, like, are the refs, like, skewed to the red?
Oh, I don't know about that.
I saw some. Well, let me put it this way. I sometimes some calls came that was like a little favorable to Kansas City. I'm not going to say one way or the other, but boy, that was,
I don't know. All I know, the Philadelphia Eagles are way better than I thought they were. So, I mean, that's just me. I've only seen them 4 or 5 times this year, but holy cow.
Did you know, Michael Barr, that the Philadelphia Eagles were that good?
Well, I remember saying this. It's like that team scares me. And in fact, that team scared me even more than the Minnesota Vikings, down the road. But yeah, this is going to be a good game. The Chiefs are like favored by very slightly.
Really?
Oh, good point.
Okay.
So, but Saquon Barkley just
nobody
crazy.
cares. Who's Mrs. Barr betting on?
Yes.
Oh, she'll probably go for. No, she wants to go for the Eagles because she is getting sick and tired of. The Chiefs and all this, that, whatever. Yeah. All I know is, yes, Patrick Mahomes, you are going to the Hall of Fame unless you try to spike a football. And I don't know if you saw, he tried to spike the football and it didn't quite get over. Let's put it that way.
Well, we'll have to see. We'll have a lot more chat on this. It's 2 weeks away, right? It's
2 weeks away.
They got to build it up for 2 weeks. I don't get that. I wish
we kind of got the Pro Bowl thing in there.
Week as well. With all of this uproar, and we're really going to dig into it, we're going to give you a value add here with the NASDAQ negative 4% again with our tech experts today on DeepSeek. But also, Neil Ferguson will join us in the 8 o'clock hour. Sir Neil, is just outstanding at putting decades in perspective. And after what we saw this weekend, whatever your politics, whatever we're seeing right now in a redux to William McKinley is what Mr. Trump, President Trump would like to think. To have Neil Ferguson with us for an extended conversation today is a good thing. Paul, what are you watching? I mean,
well, I'm watching this Nasdaq here. Tom, down 4%. I mean, this is a story that just came out of nowhere, I think, for most
I felt
investors.
That, yeah. Mandeep alluded to that.
Yeah, so you think about that whole AI trade has been central to the technology trade for the last several years, but I would argue AI has been a theme that's been central for the broader U.S. equity markets for the last 2.5 years. And if you have to rethink that in the context of a Chinese alternative, perhaps a lower cost, a similar quality performance, then you have to rethink a lot. And that's what we're seeing in the NASDAQ futures, I guess.
We'll have to see. Stay with us, of course, on your commute across the nation on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Good morning on Sirius XM. What is it, channel 120?
121. There you go.
121?
Sure.
Good morning. And on YouTube, subscribe out there to Bloomberg Podcast. And we got a great live chat. Paul Sweeney's on the live chat. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Matei. We've got NASDAQ futures continuing to get beat up this morning. Right now, down nearly 4%. This is as Chinese AI startup DeepSeek's cheaper new model. Well, it's raising some questions about America's dominance in tech. So that's leading to tech stocks. NVIDIA down 11%, Broadcom down 12%. Even over Europe, ASML Holding down 8%. Now on the flip side of that, you have shares of Chinese tech firms with ties to DeepSeek's business model where they're rallying. You have TRS Information Tech up 17% and Merit Interactive up about 20%. So we talked about NASDAQ futures. Let's get to S&P futures, down about more than 2%, 137 points. Dow futures down 0.9%, 405 points. The two-year yield, 4.18%, down 8 basis points. And the yield on the 10-year, 4.51%, down 10 basis points. Also want to point out Bitcoin down 5% at below, just above 99,000. To earnings we go. Want to point out FinTech SoFi Technologies. They did report a beat on earnings and profit guidance, but its shares down 10%. Not sure if all this tech news today has anything to do with that, but we'll keep you updated. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Hey, Tom, looking at this, the volume of NASDAQ 100 futures, this is Bloomberg reporting, the volume of NASDAQ 100 futures contracts changing hands was about 4 times the 30-day average. So people are really jumping into this.
They're jumping into this. The VIX 21.37 and we're down 3.9%. There's stasis to the negative 3%, but Paul and I look at the red and green on the Bloomberg Launchpad on the terminal, on the professional service, and it's got a certain sprightliness to it today, as Paul mentions. We get lucky. Paul Donovan is with us with UBS London, but far more importantly, we got even more lucky because we begged him to delay an early 7-hour appearance. And we really, Paul, thank you so much for letting us get to Mandeep Singh on China technology. Are you, within all the ability, going back to Jonathan Anderson and UBS, can you describe the technology effort of China? Can you add some color there?
Well, I think there has been a consistent effort to develop domestic technology within mainland China. And they've had some significant challenges in doing this. So China is a water-deprived country, large amounts of water scarcity. That makes developing things like chips, which are very water-intensive, quite difficult to do. But they've overcome some of these different difficulties. They have developed, obviously, a lot of hardware, technology. They have the advantage of a very large, relatively homogenized market in which to test these things out, so that's also been helpful. But I think actually one of the critical things we need to remember, at least from the economic point of view, is technology isn't very important.
Right.
It's how we use the technology that matters. And so although there's a lot of focus on, well, they've got new tech coming on, and that is important, actually it's how that tech is going to be used and whether it's allowed to be used to its fullest potential.
Chris Miller, in my book of the year last year, Chip War, which is like 3 years old now. I think NVIDIA doesn't show up till page 250. Paul Donovan, in the fabulous book Chip War, he devotes a whole section down the road to China. Do they feel like they're at war with us on tech? Are they saying we have these constraints and so this is the path we have to take? Is there a belt in road tech for China?
I'm not sure about Belt and Road because that was actually not that successful, and it was more of about a soft power projection and so on. I think that there is certainly a reaction to what we are seeing coming through from technology restrictions. But this is always the way. The moment you put on restrictions, people will try and find a way around those restrictions. It's just human nature. And we see this with sanctions. We see this with trade tariffs. We see with embargoes, as we're seeing with China today. So people will try and be creative to get around restrictions when they are imposed.
Paul, one could argue that one of the reasons for the great technology strength of the United States has been the laissez-faire attitude of regulators, of government regulators. Does China have a government that could be supportive of technology broadly defined?
Well, I think, again, in terms of creating technology, yes, potentially. And I would question about how much technology comes from a laissez-faire approach from government. Remember, the internet is a government creation. It comes out of the military. And so a lot of aspects of technology and technological development have their roots in government funding, government purposes, which are then taken and exploited by the private sector subsequently. And that, I think, is the issue that I think we need to focus on more with China. It's not, can they create new chips? Can they come up with new technology? It's, are they going to be able to use that given censorship restrictions? How dare you challenge the party? That's going to be the question.
Paul Donovan with us with UBS. I can't say enough, folks, to his commitment on LinkedIn. Brilliant Union Bank of Switzerland notes from Paul Donovan out on LinkedIn. Paul, I guess we had a test in a blur of 12 hours, I think between two football games, over Colombia. Colombia's not China. What did Beijing learn about President Trump's tariff approach over a long Sunday?
I'm not sure how much China will have learned, because I think there has been a shift in President Trump's approach to tariffs between the first administration and this administration. So in the first administration, as it were, the Colombia model was what was followed, which was, you make slightly implausible threats and then do a deal that would probably have been done anyway, and then take the threats off again. So it was that sort of backwards and forwards, and it's tariffs as a negotiating tool. The thing is, I think there is now also a vein within this administration which thinks of tariffs as a good thing, all in capital letters. And I think China is concerned that they're not going to be the target of tariffs as a bargaining tool. They're going to be the target of tariffs as a good thing, which are more enduring. And where actually you can't bargain them away, it becomes more of a permanent feature, at least for the life of the current administration. So I think that what we saw over the weekend was in many ways sort of a classic variation on Trump term one. And I think what China is worried about is, are we going to be subject to a different philosophy of tariffs in the Trump term two?
Paul, chief economist at UBS Global Wealth Management, what is your view of this U.S. economy in 2025, given some of the changes that we've seen in the White House with the election, in Congress? Have you guys kind of changed your view? How's your view evolved over the last month or two?
I think essentially the view has not particularly evolved, because we're starting this year with very, very solid economic foundations. The consumer, has come out of the post-pandemic period, the last 4 years, with a fairly solid balance sheet for middle-income consumers. Real wages, real incomes have been rising. There's very low fear of unemployment as we start 2025. And so that gives us that very solid foundation. Now, I think what has happened is we have seen selected sectors of the economy come under quite a lot of pressure. The thing is, if you look at, say, healthcare and the National Health Institutes, you break up a research lab, it doesn't come back together again. That's gone. And, universities in the UK are busy dusting off their recruiting tools to go out and pull people into the UK, for example. So there are certain areas where there is disruption, but these are more sector level rather than macroeconomic. On the tariff side and on the immigration side, I think the extremes are not coming through. It's very early stages, of course, but we're seeing a lot of noise on tariffs, but we're not actually seeing day one tariffs coming in. And on the migration side, are we actually going to see more deportations than we saw under President Biden? I think we're going to see more media commentary on it. I'm not sure we're actually going to see more deportations. And again, that means that the economy is more able to jog along.
Paul, I got to leave it there. Paul Donovan, and thank you for being such a sport and delaying this visit this morning. Paul Donovan, of course, chief economist at UBS Global Wealth Management. Can't say enough about his commitment to the study of China. We're going to be very careful about the data checks today. We've got stasis in the NASDAQ, negative 3.9%. The VIX slightly improved in the last 20 minutes, 21.15. That's a big six big figure move, I should say, in the VIX. The dollar is weaker. Euro above a 105 gets my attention this morning. In the yield space, we're in 9 basis points. We're down 11 basis points in the 10-year. Excuse me, I was looking at the wrong line. That happens when the eyes go. Negative 11 basis points in the 10-year yield. The 2s, 10s, it's coming in a little bit. Again, the date calendar here is in 25 minutes. Mandeep Singh will join us again. We'll try not to redux his commitment to the 7 o'clock hour, but we'll have Mandeep Singh with us, Anurag Rana with us. Saritha Rai will join for Bloomberg in Bangalore on the news of the moment. DeepSeek, turmoil in the semiconductor space. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We continue to follow shares of NVIDIA now down 11%. Chinese startup DeepSeek's lower-cost AI model, well, it's starting to cast some doubt on tech valuations. Mandeep Singh said it. Its AI assistant top ChatGPT to become the top free app on the U.S. App Store. It's not just NVIDIA being affected, though. We have Broadcom down about 12%. In Europe, ASML Holding down 7%. It's all pushing futures lower. NASDAQ futures down more than 3.5%, 841 points. S&P futures down more than 2%, 137 points, and Dow futures down nearly 1% at 352 points. We have the 2-year yield 4.18%, down 8 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.52%, and that's down 10 basis points. Over to commodities, we have Brent crude $78 a barrel, WTI crude $74 a barrel. Want to point out the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down about 0.1%. Now, all this talk of tech, we have more economic data out today. Can't forget to mention the read on new home sales and building permits. That does come out today. And we have companies making news like activist Ancora. It's said to have nominated 9 candidates for U.S. Steel's board, and it wants to bring an end to the Nippon Steel deal. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Again, 3.85% in the NASDAQ. A fractionally better tape here in the last 20 minutes. We're down 4%, call it, on the NASDAQ. The VIX, 21.08. We may get a 20 print here. Maybe a little bit of calming here after the 5 a.m., 6 a.m. storm. We welcome all of you worldwide. We're going to go to Bangalore here in the next hour as well, where we've really got the font of our Asia AI study. Right now, and she's wearing black, I noticed, out on YouTube. Henrietta Trace is dressed in black, which is,
understood,
with the news flow coming out of her Washington, just extraordinary. We're thrilled that she could join us from Veda Partners. Henrietta, this is a 4-hour conversation, but let me just start. I heard Stargate, and I thought Kurt Russell and James Spader in that movie from a million years ago. Does Stargate have any support in Washington except from the Oval Office?
Well, first of all, it's a dark green, so I think there's some optimism in the future to come out.
Very Philadelphia.
Yeah, exactly. Go Eagles. It's going to be a really interesting time to see the investment that the United States chooses to go after, specifically, as you mentioned, from the Oval Office, because Congress is so far away from enacting any of their legislative agenda. I imagine we are at a minimum 3 months away. So all the action really has to come from the Oval Office, and announcing any big investments that are going to come from the private sector. Investments from Congress are, as I said, months away. And as we all know, it takes months, if not years, for that to trickle through the economy as well.
Okay, we checked that box.
Yes, exactly.
Henrietta, I know how to spell Colombia. Other people don't. I got lectured by the Minister of Finance once of Colombia on this at an IMF meeting. Were you surprised that we went after Colombia in between quarters of the football game?
I mean, it's really an example of punching down, especially since Colombia has been receiving plane loads of migrants 500 times, if I'm not mistaken, the last couple of years. And I think that this was a very sort of almost scripted, made-for-TV drama with the two presidents going back and forth on Twitter. So I don't think that there was a huge amount of pain on the U.S. side here. It's a $16 billion trading partner. The bigger fish are coming on February 1st, as you know, with Canada and Mexico and potentially also China. I think there's also going to be a delay time there. And I'm taking that from just historical precedent from this administration. We saw both the 232 tariffs and the IEEPA tariffs with Canada and Mexico specifically with a 10-day lag. So I think that's where investors' heads are focused, but we should be expecting tariffs without question.
Paul, I'm so in a timeout chair.
Yep.
I call it meddling because I'm an ugly American.
Oh, that's terrible.
Sebastian with us today as our global technical director. Boy, did he just put me in the Colombia timeout chair.
Medellin.
Cartagena is where all the beautiful people like Lisa Mateo go. Have you been there?
No, of course
It's
not.
like very touristy. It's on the the Gulf of America coast and all that. If you go directly south, and it's pronounced Medellin.
Yep.
I think, did I get that right?
Medellin.
But Sebastian, Medellin, I'm so sorry, Sebastian. Can I stay?
Can he stay?
Okay, because CLOM.
Yes.
Good morning, Morningside Heights. Paul, save me here.
Henrietta, we've got some confirmations that are still up for the Senate to take a look at. We had Mr. Hegseth get approved last week. Do we expect any fireworks going forward on some of these?
The ones that really are getting the most attention right now are Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., and Kash Patel. I wanted to say that Tulsi Gabbard was going to be the most imperiled, and I think that's widely considered to be correct, except for that she's got former Republican Senator Richard Burr in her corner, which is a very big deal. This is like hearkening back to my days as a Senate staffer. To have him as her Sherpa, I think, is a really important component. He carries a lot of weight with the Republican conference. And I think that the incoming majority leader, the new majority leader in the United States Senate, Senator Thune, is really going to the mat to try to get Trump's nominees confirmed, portending, I think, an interest in saving his arrows for bigger fights that are sure to come over the next border bill, military spending. Just that first package alone could be $500 to $700 billion. And then a big tax bill that's going to be $2.5 trillion later on in the year is a very much saving your firepower for.
In improving tape, the VIX was at 21 level, now 20.79. It's grasping straws. Okay,
yes.
Cut me some slack.
Exactly.
The tape's improving.
The Nasdaq was down 5% earlier this morning, now down 3.7% in the futures. Henrietta, what's the to-do list for Congress over the next couple of 3 months? What should we be looking for? Exactly.
Oh my gosh, how much time do you have? We have so much to do. I think one of the things that I'm really feeling right now to sort of stay on the Thune bandwagon is to bemoan the lack of clear direction from the Republican conference. You have a Senate who wants two different reconciliation bills, neither of which have started in the Budget Committee, and the House that has, at my last count, at least 3 different ideas about how they want to proceed, and they're going to be talking about that in Florida this week. So what we really want to keep our eyes on is the prize of the budget package, see whether they use a fiscal year 25 or fiscal year 26 budget resolution. That will tell you everything immediately. It's super wonky, but if they pick 26, it means we're only getting one big bill. Those are the things I'm focused on right now.
Henrietta Clinic, thank you so much. Greatly appreciated this morning. Henrietta Trays with a little bit of DeepSeek. Actually, Deep State. I think they changed it. I think Deep State works.
Yeah.
DeepSeek. I'm kidding, folks. 20.77. And improving tape because Michael Barr walked in the studio with our news in New York City. Mr. Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Fire officials in Southern California are bracing for possible mudslides in the fire-scarred areas of Los Angeles. The first significant rain in Southern California in months is also triggering fears of flooding. Mud has forced street closures, but Cal Fire Battalion Chief Brent Pasqua says that the fires are out and that the rain is helping.
This rate right now is really good. It's going to soak the ground for us. It's going to, any hidden hot spots that we're still out there tackling, it's going to help with that. It's when the rate goes up and we start getting it really quickly that you're going to see that mud flows, and that's what we don't want.
In Los Angeles County, more residents are trying to get back into their homes. The White House is claiming victory in a showdown with Colombia over accepting flights of deported migrants from the U.S. hours after President Donald Trump threatened steep tariffs on imports and other sanctions on the longtime U.S. partner. The White House says it includes the unrestricted acceptance of all illegal aliens from Colombia on U.S. military aircraft without limitation or delay. Another round of confirmation hearings on Capitol Hill this week to establish Donald Trump's cabinet. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports from Washington.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will testify over 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday. He faces pushback from physicians concerned about his stance on vaccines and a conservative group led by former Vice President Mike Pence, who opposed Kennedy's support for abortion access. Tulsi Gabbard will appear before the Senate Intelligence Committee on Thursday to become Director of National Intelligence. So far, at least 2 Republicans remain on the fence. Nominee for FBI Director Kash Patel testifies on Thursday. He's come under fire for suggesting he would go after Trump's political adversaries. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
And the stage is set. Super Bowl 59, Eagles against the Chiefs. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it. With Bloomberg News Now, I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. NVIDIA, now I mentioned 2 standard deviations, 40 minutes ago? NVIDIA now through 2 standard deviations on a daily chart. 129 is the level, now printing 126 on NVIDIA from a 142 down to 126 on NVIDIA, taking it back to, I'm going to call it early October. Early October is where we're back to.
I'm reading the quick take by Bloomberg News on this whole story, and again, these stories, these quick takes by Bloomberg News are just fantastic, and learning a lot here.
Well, much more on you in 15 minutes. Mandeep Singh with us. It's Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines on Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, and Lisa Mateo.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene. We say good morning to you. Right now, the daily look at the front pages. It's brought to you by IBKR. Will the average U.S. temperature in January 2025 be greater than 34 degrees? Trade your prediction with IBKR Forecast Trader. The yes was recently at 14%. Makes sense. Buy yes or no and earn $1 if you're right. Go to ibkr.com/forecast. Interactive Brokers, ibkr.com/forecasts. We dash to the newspapers. Lisa, Tell me, we're DeepSeek free
We are
for the
DeepSeek
newspapers
free.
today?
I know. Trying to do something a little different. We've talked about more companies pushing workers back to the office, right? But not everyone at the company is being treated the same. They're saying it's causing a lot of tension now in the workplace because you have some people in the company, like the top performers, the employees with those certain skill sets, they're being given that flexibility.
Yeah, Michael Barr.
Yeah, Michael, he comes in once in a while because the companies don't want to lose them to other companies. You know, it's that whole thing of stealing each other's workers. So it's a lot of tension in the workplace that's starting to cause a tension between the managers and the staff on top of it. So
It's really fluid. I mean, into the warmer season, into spring, to me, it's a hugely fluid debate.
Some people take Fridays off in the summertime, I've heard.
Oh, they do?
Yes, what I've heard.
We missed that memo.
Yeah, it works out. It works out with me and Paul because he takes every Friday off, and I'm like, year-end, the famine, all that.
It works out.
Next, what do
It
you
does.
got?
We want to go to the airline industry because you're seeing this shift in the pricing power now going back to the carriers. If you've been pricing tickets out there, you've noticed prices for the cheapest flights up 12% this month from a year earlier. That's according to Hopper. But the airlines are saying people are going to pay it no matter what. And they're saying people are paying it. Domestic, yes, international as well.
JFK
and
to
then,
Paris? What do we got on JFK to Paris?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much of a deal there you're getting. But they're saying what's shifting too is that the discount airlines, you've seen them, who usually go to these, consumer, budget conscious people, they're starting to shift to the more advanced. And then you have the luxury sector. Now you have all these luxury items being offered out on the plane. So if you go on a flight, you may have a cosmetic bag filled with all these premium, lotions and perfumes.
Yeah.
You're getting caviar, champagne.
Peanuts and
The
Coca-Cola.
caviar I have not seen.
You have not seen yet.
I'm waiting to see the caviar.
You haven't gotten your Cristal champagne?
At Newark, what is it, Hudson River Sturgeon?
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, everything's a la carte, though. You pay for everything now. So, I mean, the bags, the this, that, the better seats. So,
we had an offspring at the airport with a lot of luggage call up and say, I can't believe what they're, they want from me right now for 3 extra bags or whatever.
3 extra.
2 weeks in Europe with 1 check-in.
Yep.
That's it?
I don't take it.
You don't take a bag?
I don't take anything.
No, the kids, they take too much stuff today. Next.
And lastly, okay, so you heard about Costco is switching back from Coke, back to Coke from Pepsi.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, that's big.
That's huge for you. I know, Paul. You're the Coke Pepsi
I'm
guy.
a Coke person, but I won't die on that hill. You put a Pepsi in front of me, I'll be fine.
But it's like this huge debate on social media.
Explain at Costco on a Saturday morning, Coke, no Pepsi.
Yeah, people are like rabid. They want it with their $1.50 hot dog. They want to have their certain soda because they're used to it.
Can you tell the difference?
I can't.
Wait, you haven't had a Coke.
You haven't had a soda.
You haven't had a Coke or
years.
Pepsi since Nixon was
No,
president.
I'm the soda person here, and I actually have almost a year and a half. I put in a ticket every day to bring back the soda machines on the 6th floor. It's going up to the highest level of Bloomberg.
But if you did
now.
the blind taste test, could you tell the difference? You could.
You can tell a difference.
Yeah, but again, I'm a Coke person, but you put a Pepsi in front of me, just as happy. I mean, I don't know. Anybody else back there? Any opinions? I mean, Coke, Pepsi? I don't know. Who cares?
I don't know.
But the organic stuff they have on the 6th floor has to go. If somebody's listening that can do something here at Bloomberg, get rid of it. They have organic soda on the 6th floor. I mean,
that's un-American.
It's un-American, exactly. So I'm talking to the highest people here at Bloomberg to get our soda machines
The
back.
newspapers. Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. We're getting ready for the Super Bowl. So we need songs from Kansas City, songs from Philadelphia. No, we start strong. Head to toe in Louis Vuitton, Taylor Swift.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
What do you say to people scared stiff in cash?
We've got an administration, presumably, that will be pro-business, lower taxes.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
The president is focused on geopolitics.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. Let's get right to the markets. That's what matters this morning. We're going to go to Bangalore, India in a moment with true Bloomberg expertise on this AI uproar out of China. Saritha Ray will join us as well. Mandeep Singh will tag along in this hour, and so much more going on. The markets have improved in the last 60 minutes. But I don't want to oversell it. I got VIX 21.10, had 20 for a while. Paul, I had 4% down on the NASDAQ, now to 2 decimals, negative 3.86.
Yep, and movement in the bond market as well, Tom. Got the 10-year Treasury in 10 basis points, 4.51 on your 10-year Treasury.
BitDog was down under 100,000, back there at that level. Joe Weisenthal out on Twitter being a value add this morning. Really, he's been actually using ChatGPT and other stuff.
Oh, nice.
I'll give him
cutting edge.
I'll give him that. He's on top of it. He and Tracy at Odd Lots, they're on top of it. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning on your commute on YouTube as well. Bloomberg Surveillance brought to you by Cohn Resnick, Advisory Assurance Tax. Discover game-changing strategies to maximize value, optimize performance, and manage risk. Put your business at the forefront. And we thank Cohn Resnick for heritage support of all we do here right now. Right now, let's go to the Interactive Brokers, Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
You got it. Yeah, NASDAQ futures still taking a hit right now, down nearly 4%. Lower cost AI model from Chinese startup DeepSeek raising the questions over those high valuations of companies like NVIDIA. That's really putting the broader tech sector on track for a $1 trillion wipeout. You have NVIDIA shares down 11%. If that holds, it could be set for its biggest drop on record in terms of market cap. We go to Broadcom, their shares down about 12%. Even over in Europe, you have ASML Holding falling more than 7%. Not just NASDAQ futures, though. We go to S&P futures down more than 2%, 139 points. Dow futures down 0.7%, 345 points. The 2-year yield, 4.18%, down 8 basis points. And the yield on the 10-year, 4.51%, and that's down 10 basis points. All comes ahead of a big week for tech earnings, companies like Apple and Microsoft. Speaking of which, Apple down more than 1%, Microsoft down 3%. In the meantime, we did get more earnings. AT&T, fourth quarter results topped estimates, but shares actually down nearly 1%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it. Mandeep Singh walking into the studio. We'll get to him in a moment, but this is a real honor, folks. We've never had her on the program before, but it's legit tech credibility from Bangalore. We hear of Bombay, we hear of Mumbai, we hear of Delhi. To the south is a tech capital of India in Bangalore, and holding court there out of Stanford is Saritha Ray, our Asia AI reporter with credit the New York Times and Forbes along the Saritha Ray path. Saritha, did you see DeepSeek coming? Is this something that was on your radar 30 or 180 days ago?
Definitely over 30 days ago, Tom. I've been watching it for the last few months, closely watching it ever since they released their models in November, and developers around me started talking about these models. Now, this is really a very unknown entity coming out of China. Not many people were still, in the West were still noticing the models. But this startup, which was headquartered in Hangzhou, started building and bettering their models with each release. And in December, they released a reasoning model that really outperformed many of the models that the Western companies have released so far.
One of the great questions, Saritha, on our YouTube feed, Good Morning in India, for all of you that listen to us in your evening on YouTube. Saritha, somebody said simply, wait a minute, America's going after TikTok. Is DeepSeek a safe app on the iPhone App Store? I mean, is it another TikTok waiting to happen?
Tom, a lot of people are now looking closely at the privacy disclaimers on DeepSeek, and there are concerns about that. There are concerns about data privacy and about what kind of data the app and the models are amassing. So that is definitely going to be a question in the coming weeks and months, for sure.
Tom, one of the millions of reasons the value of the Bloomberg terminal is Bloomberg News. And these quick takes, Tom, I mean, you had to get smart on this DeepSeek thing in like 15 minutes. That's why they created the quick take. I mean, and Sarita and her colleague Newly Purnell came out with this quick take today. Everything you need to know on DeepSeek is right there. I can walk into any cocktail party and be an expert. Right. What's amazing here is Mark Andreessen calling it AI's Sputnik moment. What does this mean for Silicon Valley?
Well, a lot of the Silicon Valley companies and Silicon Valley giants have, invested billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars of capital expenditure to, build the infrastructure and run these models. Now, there's coming a question about whether such huge capex and operating expenses are really necessary to build the latest type of AI models. That's the question that everybody is asking. So, which is why you're seeing a huge rout in the stocks of all of the AI, all of the Silicon Valley giants, as well as the AI companies, chip makers, every one of them.
In your late evening, Sarita Rai, thank you so much for joining Bloomberg in New York City. Greatly appreciated. From Bangalore, she owns the high ground for Bloomberg on Asia AI. We welcome all of you on your commute this morning across the nation, around the world. Good morning on YouTube, particularly in Asia. Huge evening audience in Asia. And we continue now with Mandeep Singh with all of his expertise with Bloomberg Intelligence. I got to go back to what Paul said, where Mark Andreessen said it's a Sputnik moment. That's strong language from someone hugely qualified, but Sputnik, I would suggest, changed the world. Do you buy it that it's a Sputnik moment, Mandeep?
No, I think this is more about how you can scale the deployment of AI to the masses. And really, price was a sticking point when it comes to deploying AI. And what this is suggesting now is price will come down exponentially.
Okay, my brother was on this. I'm not going to go into the FAM details, but OpenAI DeepSeek is going to be what Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene use, and adults like you are going to use something fancier?
Well, so I look at this as more of a Linux moment. Look, for a while, Windows was where everything was done and there was no open source option. Linux changed everything. In this case, you have an open source model, and I, really attribute this to Meta, who open sourced their model since the inception. That is the basis for why DeepSeek has come, so quickly on the scene, because you had an open source model that they could leverage and then improve and fine tune. And look, I think open source is always got a big community in terms of improvements and everything. And that's what you are going to see here. Like ChatGPT will continue to improve, but then the open source will always be the cheaper option, and there will be an ecosystem that will be created around it.
But like all other Chinese AI models, DeepSeek self-censors on topics deemed sensitive to China. Doesn't that make it an inferior product?
Well, so there are certain topics that every model kind of make sure that, their model doesn't say anything that's incorrect or hallucinate for that matter. And in this case, given, DeepSeek operates in China, they are sensitive to anything they say around the...
This is really important. Yeah. Thank you, Paul, for bringing this up. So there's a thing on Tiananmen Square. They clearly block that. I get it. But if it's open sourced, can somebody in America rejigger DeepSeek so it has American transparency versus what Paul was just mentioning?
Yeah, so the thing about open source is open source means the technique they use to train the model has been open source. The data
Can't
that's
be
inside
changed.
the model is still proprietary. So DeepSeek's database is different from Meta Llama's database, even though both are open source models.
Can they see? I mean, Afterthought's going to be all over
Oh,
this.
yeah.
I mean, can they see what Afterthought's doing on DeepSeek in Beijing?
I'm sure, these companies will build on each other here. That's what happened, I think, even with DeepSeek building on top of Llama. So there will be companies that will build on top of DeepSeek. But when it comes to implementing controls, everyone is very careful about the kind of responses the model gives. And you can train the model to restrict their comments on certain topics. And I think that's what
How do you pronounce llama? Is it llama or yama or llama? Llama? Brockton, come on, help me out here. How do they pronounce that? At the llama farm, Brockton, at the llama farm in Brockton, Massachusetts. How do they pronounce llama? Help me here, continue.
So is this going to be, Mandeep, another TikTok type situation? I've got a Chinese government controlling data in the U.S., consumers in the U.S., access to data. Seems like the same thing to me.
Absolutely. I think if people are going to use it, which we can see it's the most downloaded app, with LLM-based apps, you are basically interacting with a chatbot where you are giving them your query. They're learning about your preferences.
By the end of business today, that's going to be the story on the terminal, I think.
I don't disagree. I mean, this is great. Anurag Rana will be with us in an hour with Mandeep as well. The live chat on YouTube today is fired up with people smarter than me. Wait, it's like that every day. It's just this is brilliant. Who is Red Hat anyway? Thank you for that, TH. Red Hat was a total panic. We're all going to die. You mentioned Linux, which I studied it for like one day. It was like my Python experience one day. Okay, Red Hat. Is this going to be like a Red Hat where we're all in a lather and 90 days from now it'll be like old news?
Look, I think from a community building perspective, the adoption of open source models is really going to take off here. Yeah. And that's what I expect. That's why I drew that Linux analogy, because you will see a lot of small software companies saying, we don't have the CapEx budgets like the hyperscalers, but we want to deploy
Microsoft
AI.
Or whatever.
And we want to deploy AI, and open source is a very good option.
Mandeep Singh driving the market higher. We were negative 4% in the NASDAQ, now negative 3.55%. That's an improvement in the NASDAQ. The Dow down less than 1% right now. And the VIX, I got a 20 level again from 21 down to 20.83. So, what'd you say last week? Quiescent?
Quiescent. I love it.
You nailed that.
I'm all in on that.
Did you learn that? If you own a Vespa, you say quiescent? Okay.
Exactly. So, Mandeep, you mentioned earlier about pricing. If DeepSeek becomes a competitive, or I guess it is already a significant competitor, is that going to force OpenAI, other U.S. providers maybe to lower their prices?
Absolutely. I mean, you cannot charge $200 a month no matter how good your model is. And so this will force them to bring the prices down. At the same time, it could drive up the adoption. So the cash burn rate for OpenAI is going to go up because they can't make as much money. But it's going to be deployed more places.
And let's talk earnings here. Let's try to get away from a DeepSeek right now. In earnings here, what are you going to hear about, as you say, adoption of ChatGPT? Are they going to tell us the pickup?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the Project Stargate announcement was significant, as was Meta raising their CapEx. So one, Google, do they raise their CapEx or not, given the sequence of events now with DeepSeek and the others? And, the same thing with Amazon and the others. Right. It's all about what are your CapEx plans and how do you monetize it? In the case of Microsoft, they will monetize it through their cloud business. That 10 billion number they gave last quarter, where does it come up this quarter, and what the growth is going to look like? And so that's the key for me.
Thank you so much out on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast, building each and every day. Paul, news you can use. I mean, I'm sorry. Sauli, thank you so much. Llama, as is in Yama of Yamaha. Okay, Sauli, that really helps here with our Meta Yama.
And people on YouTube live chat are saying, how come you guys didn't know about this before? I was like, there's only so much I can do, people. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there.
No, but this is important. This was on we covered this in the
This was on your wheelhouse.
This was on your radar.
Yeah, this was. But
is this on Meta's radar?
I'm sure these companies are aware, But nobody thought, DeepSeek is coming out with a paper that really will lay out everything in a way which I think is quite transformational when you think about the impact on the pricing when it comes to these.
And who's your analyst in Hong Kong? Rob
Lee.
Rob Lee, BI Go. He's got the definitive research that's been out there for a couple of months. Somehow I missed it.
This is not sourced, but I'm going to go with it. Jeffrey, a legit guy out on the terminal. Thank you, Jeffrey. He is suggesting DeepSeek sign-up process broken this morning. It doesn't work. I don't know what that means. We have to confirm that.
All right, we'll see.
I was going to go in and sign up for DeepSeek.
Yeah, exactly.
I had to go out and feed the llamas.
Right, the llamas. All right, so Mandeep, we're going to hear from the big tech companies in the next week or two. What are the themes as it relates to AI that you think you're going to be listening for?
I think the cloud inferencing revenue from GCP, from Microsoft Azure and Amazon AWS, these companies will be benchmarked on that cloud inferencing revenue. And if training is going to cost less dollars, that should actually accelerate cloud inferencing revenue. So my bet is you will see these companies guide higher cloud revenue when they're
really.
Moments ago, Stacy Rasgon, huge. Stacy is at Sanford Bernstein. I'm sorry, I say Sanford Bernstein. Get over it.
Yep.
At Bernstein, Stacy Rasgon will join us here in about 25 minutes, just on the sell side, very up to speed on the story. Mandeep, can you come back in the 9? We got some thug from Chicago coming in. Anurag's coming in. You guys can't be in the same room at the same time.
No, it's in our contract.
Mandeep Singh, Anurag, Rana, they'll be with us together at the 9 o'clock hour. And again, the tape improves now from a negative 4% to negative 3.48% on the NASDAQ. It's just fascinating. I've learned more in the last 30 minutes about DeepSeek and llamas.
Yep. Right, everything you need to know. So we've got all.
Seriously, it's Meta Llama. Is there a project like this?
Again, the quick takes from Bloomberg News, the research from Bloomberg Intelligence.
Yeah.
Again, in half an hour, you can get as smart as you need to be on DeepSeek.
Oh, we're going to work on it. There's many other stories out there as well. Let's get to that with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, Lisa, Israel is allowing Palestinians to return to the heavily destroyed northern Gaza Strip for the first time since the early weeks of the 15-month war with Hamas, in accordance with the fragile ceasefire. Thousands of Palestinians headed north today after waiting for days to cross. In exchange, 2 more Israeli hostages will be released this week. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a short message thanking President Trump. It comes after Trump ordered the resumption of shipments of 2,000-pound bombs to Israel.
Thank you, President Trump, for keeping your promise to give Israel the tools it needs to defend itself, to confront our common enemies, and to secure a future of peace and prosperity.
Former President Joe Biden had put the shipments on hold, citing concerns about the use of the weapons in areas with high concentrations of civilians. The UN General Assembly has designated today as International Holocaust Remembrance Day. January 27th is the anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz concentration camp. The day will honor the 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust. It comes as law enforcement notes a rise in anti-Semitism around the world. Jocelyn Getchin-Kestenbaum is a professor of law at the Benjamin N. Cardozo School of Law.
There are a significant number of survivors who are no longer with us, and therefore there is an increasing Holocaust denial. It's something that we must counter. And eyewitness testimonials have always been a powerful way to combat such denial.
Law professor Jocelyn Getchin-Kestenbaum. The first report on last month's Jeju air crash in South Korea has confirmed traces of bird strikes in the plane's engines. Officials, though, haven't determined the cause of the accident that killed all but 2 of the 181 people on board. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
A story out there, and thanks Will Wade for this, driving in Ford in Los Angeles. Paul, you mentioned this earlier. Rainfall in L.A., but it's not like rainfall in Central Park.
No. They get the flood issues out there because it's so dry. And now they've lost, so much vegetation with the fires, and you get some floods and mudslides and things like that. So
2 inches of rain, I guess, is in our story, and I guess more coming here.
Yep. But I mean, I think you got to take it. I mean, you have to have it. I mean, just to prevent any further fires, I guess.
Well, I guess that's good news here as we get into the recovery process. I'm not sure where that is. We'll try to get that to you. I want to get out front on this. This was well-timed, way before all this DeepSeek uproar. Coming off of Davos, now Ferguson will join us. Cernal is absolutely definitive here on a decade's view of our capitalism, on our history as well. We're going to have an extended conversation with Niall Ferguson. He's got a lovely article in Foreign Affairs summarizing this moment that we're all living in. Whatever your politics, Cernal will be with us here in a bit. I got a negative 120 on S&P futures, a negative 290 on Dow futures. NASDAQ improves, negative 3.4%. We're on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, NASDAQ futures continue to get it beat up, down more than 3.5%. They were down, not as bad as earlier when they were down as much as 5%. All comes after that Chinese startup put Silicon Valley in a bit of a panic. We're talking about DeepSeek, its cheaper new AI model. You have NVIDIA down 11%, Broadcom down 10%, AI stocks like Palantir, a Dan Ives favorite, down 4%, Super Microcomputer down 8%. You go to AI infrastructure-related stocks like ARM Holding down 7%. Same for Oracle, down 7%. Even taking it over to Europe, ASML Holding down 8%. Now on the flip side, you have shares of Chinese tech firms that have ties to DeepSeek's business model. Well, they're rallying. You have TRS Information Tech up 17%. Merit Interactive up 20%. So we talked about NASDAQ futures. We'll go to S&P futures down 2%, 123 points. Dow futures down 0.6%, 296 points. The 2-year yield 4.20%, down 6 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.54%, and that's down 8 basis points. Just want to end with Bitcoin because it's down more than 3.5% at just over 100,000. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. When you look at equities, bonds, currencies, commodities, the advantage is the Bloomberg Launchpad. I can't count that high. I've got 60, 70 data points up on the terminal. Paul and I got the same thing, blinking red and green. And Paul, my touchstone here is the 10-year real yield from a 220 down to 2.10, and now back to 2.14. That gives you a little bit of that last 2 hours release we've seen.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And again, the kind of the news of the day, Tom, is just a little bit of this DeepSeek company, this AI company coming out of China, coming on people's radar screens if we hadn't seen it before just in the last day or two. It just kind of calls in maybe the technology underpinning of this market, which has been technology has been such a leader really over the last 15 years, but over the last 2, 3, 4 years, it's been this AI story, and the capital spending and the associated with it has been a big driver of this market performance. And now if you have a little bit of a question to that in the form of a lower cost, maybe a pretty decent competitor.
It's Monday. I mean, when we're deep into the week and we've got earnings, are we beyond this Monday with earnings? I still don't have an answer to that.
Yeah.
Mandeep, avoided that.
Right.
I asked Lisa, she avoided that.
Exactly. Well,
NVIDIA's late February.
Exactly, Tom. We've been saying now with the Fed a little bit on the sidelines here in terms of maybe 1 or 2 rate cuts this year at most. We've been saying for weeks now, if not months, that 2025 is going to be driven by earnings. And that's why earnings have been such a big issue here coming into 2025. And that's what we're seeing. We saw the big banks give us really good earnings a couple of weeks ago, Tom. We had Netflix and some other names give us some good earnings. That's been really supportive
look
for
at
the
airlines.
And the airlines,
and
exactly
Lisa's
right,
talking like higher fares.
Yep. I can't remember the last time I had a middle seat empty on any of the flights I've been on. So, it seems like the load factors, Tom, that's the term. The load factors have been pretty good for the airline industry.
We're going to see now. We're bouncing around here, folks. Neil Ferguson, we're going to get it another time. It's just not enough time to give to Sir Neil here this morning to line up really some wonderful perspective on the new administration. And I mentioned this. I mean, we've got this software Stargate thing I'm waiting to find a first constructive statement on Stargate. It's like, I don't even know where Mr. Musk is on Stargate.
No,
I'm ignorant on that.
You know, when I first read the news there last week about Stargate and his $100 billion number, perhaps going up to $500 billion, it just felt like at the first read, wasn't this money already committed by a lot of these players, and we're just kind of putting it in a new wrapper for a press release? That seems to be what Henrietta Trez from Veda Partners was saying earlier this morning. So, but hey, nevertheless, bringing more of that spending and that investment, I guess is probably the better way to think about it, onshore is a good thing.
We welcome all of you across the nation. We're getting ready for a really important interview with Bernstein on AI and on this moment. Stacy Rasgon will join us here in a bit. We welcome all of you on your commutes across America today and worldwide on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Good morning on Sirius XM. Good morning in the corridor from 92.9 FM. Good morning, Brockton. Good morning, Boston. Down here to Bloomberg 1130 in Washington, 55 points against the Commanders. I mean, a thrashing was
and pretty much all on the ground. I mean, they were rushing touchdowns
everywhere. Old line football.
Exactly, old school football. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right, Tom. So that was a good.
For those of you on radio, game. I got on a green bow tie today, I guess.
For the Eagles.
It's not Louis Vuitton. I'll let Taylor Swift wear the Louis Vuitton. We take a moment here. And out on YouTube live chat, you learn about some of your compatriots. With a ghost from years ago, they said Lisa Mateo should be on the Mount Rushmore of, is it WPIX?
Oh, yeah,
you
definitely.
And Linda Church and two other vagabonds I can't remember. Tell us about that. I mean, you were grinding out WPIX. In
Pix
New York
11.
Here.
Yes.
Classic New York City.
Every day.
Radio. Before cable television, Pix 11. And
that was it, yeah.
It was before cable. That's the key point.
Sure.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. But like 18 years, I know. It's like, whew, it's kind of like that.
They hired you at 15.
Exactly. There you go.
I can see it. And, you know, it's had a huge resonance over the years. Like WCBS. It's just...
Well, it has, like people, even still today, people are like, "Hey, you're that news lady, right? From Channel 11." I'm like, "Ooh, that was a long time ago." But yeah, no, it's true because just the local news factor of it, you know, especially around here in New York, it had such an impact. And you just, you know, talk to people. People, you know, just like we do here.
Yeah.
They feel like you're part of their family, part of their home.
In Boston, there was, I think it's WSBK, Channel 38. They had Bruins hockey.
Okay.
And a small baseball team that won every once in a while.
Yep.
And that's brilliant what you said before cable.
Before cable, it was, you had the three networks, 2, 4, and 7.
And one other channel.
And Channel 9 and Channel 11, that was New York. In Philadelphia, it was UHF, Tom, Channel 29 and Channel 48.
Yeah,
those were
that was
two,
like Boston.
Yes, where you got your
syndicated but are we after cable now, oh wise one?
Oh, yeah, everything's going to streaming. And just wait till you see a big Sunday NFL package that now sits with one of the broadcast.
I looked yesterday to see if they were streaming one of the games.
Well, yeah, they put it all, you know, NBC will put it on their streamer and CBS will put it on their streamer, Fox will.
Now, I noticed yesterday on YouTube, I'm going to call it a VPN because I'm ignorant, out of Toronto, a guy doing a play-by-play of the game, like out of the 1930s, with the radio in the background, and the radio was one play behind what was on the screen.
Yep.
And he's got like serious YouTube cred.
Yeah.
Why do they allow him to do that? Is it because he's in Canada?
Maybe, but I mean, I'm not sure what you do on YouTube and how you regulate that kind of stuff there. But I mean, there are, there are radio to TV syncs. Right. You can sync up your local play-by-play with the national feed on some of these sports.
I looked at the percentage, even with Disney merging with Hulu. You've been talking about this for years. How close are we to the great roll-up of streaming? It's got to be like this quarter.
Well, I think it's going to be, again, we got Netflix. They've obviously knocking it out of the ballpark. Extraordinarily profitable. Free cash flow like crazy. Disney is right behind them. They're probably a year behind them in terms of that kind of profitability. Then it's everybody else. And I don't know what that happens. And we've had our good friends at MoffettNathanson came out with a note a couple of weeks ago saying, hey, when you think about all those other kind of legacy media companies that are trying to make it in streaming, just feels like they got to consolidate somewhere along the lines. You think about Warner Brothers Discovery and Paramount and all these people.
We welcome all of you across the nation on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Paul, let's go through the top page of the Bloomberg right now. DeepSeek buzz puts tech shares on track for $1 trillion plunge. I'm going to say, Abhishek Vishnoi, thank you for that with Winnie Sue. And in Europe, John Patrick Barnett is helping out as well. I'm sorry. That to me is like we're coming back a little bit from $1 trillion loss. Maybe we're doing a little better.
Yeah, we'll see about that. I mean, again, the NASDAQ futures at their lowest point today, 20,700. We're right here at 21,100. So a lift off of the bottom, but clearly the market pricing in, Tom, a little bit of a questioning, if you will, to that AI underpinning for this stock market, which has been such a driver, for at least 2 years now. Not just this tech sector, but it seems like every other company out there in their conference calls talking about how AI is going to improve their business.
Sebastian Boyd over at MLive, the Market Live survey that we have, really professional. That's on the terminal. This is the Nobel laureate, Darren Acemoglu, with his AI skepticism. This is the laureate. My assessment is that there are indeed much bigger gains to be had from generative AI, which is a promising technology. These gains remain elusive unless there's a fundamental reorientation of the industry. The gentleman from MIT was Simon Johnson, Darren Acemoglu with that as well. Nobody's talking about Apple in this conflagration.
No,
we're Apple free today.
Yeah, Apple free today. We've had some weakness in that stock, Tom, as people kind of calling in to question China yet again. That seems to just kind of rear its head every once in a while. This $3.3 trillion market cap company, Tom, it's off 11% year to date.
The VIX at 21 level, out 6 big points, doing better now. 20.71. NASDAQ futures down 3.6%, down 4% earlier. Stay tuned for Global Wall Street. We speak to Stacy Rasgon next.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Oracle. Attention growing businesses. Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. For new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitment, offer ends March 31st. See if your company qualifies at oracle.com/Bloomberg. All right, we're continuing to follow shares of NVIDIA. Still down 11%. Chinese startup DeepSeek's lower cost AI model kind of casting some doubt on those tech valuations. Its AI assistant actually topped ChatGPT to become the top free app on the App Store. But it's not just NVIDIA being affected. We have Broadcom down 12% in Europe. ASML Holding down 7%, pushing futures lower. NASDAQ futures down nearly 3.5%, 758 points. S&P futures down 2%, 123 points, and Dow futures down 0.6%, 300 points. The 2-year yield at 4.19%, down 6 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.53%, and that's down 8 basis points. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down about 0.1%. We have the Japanese yen up 1% at 154.36 against the dollar. The euro, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin down about 3% at just over 101,000. I want to point out shares of fintech SoFi Technologies taking a hit, down about 12%. A beat on earnings and profit guidance, but its forecast profit did miss. And finally, Ryanair. They cut a passenger growth target for the second time in 3 months because of Boeing's delivery delays, but it did provide an earnings outlook, beat estimates estimates, so its shares are up more than 2% in Ireland. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thank you so much. Folks, this is what surveillance is about. We go out and we search, and we have levels and quality of guests. For Global Wall Street this morning, this is the conversation of the morning on this uproar. Stacy Rasgon is a double chemical engineering definitive out of UCLA and MIT. He wandered back to the Avenue of the Stars, where he is a star for Bernstein. What you need to know is in the old days, you had a black-covered book from Sanford Bernstein, and you knew, good morning, Brad Hintz, that you were dealing with the best. Stacy, honored that you could join us this morning. Will you change buy, hold, sell on the American tech companies because of this DeepSeek announcement?
I mean, look, so we haven't changed anything. We did, killed ourselves over the weekend to go through some of this stuff and put some views in place. Like I had three kind of broad takeaways from the work. Number one is I think there's been a headline, but I think this is why the circus. There was a headline that kind of came out of this that was kind of like, hey, DeepSeek duplicated OpenAI for $5 million. And everyone, so I do not think they duplicated OpenAI for $5 million. Number two, look, I think the models that they built are fantastic. They're really, really good, but I don't think they're miracles. We can talk about why. And number three, finally, like I think the panic, and there's clearly a full-blown on panic going on over the weekend and into this morning. I think it's overblown. I think, right. I do not think that DeepSeek is the doomsday for AI infrastructure.
For those of you out on radio, for those of you out on radio, on YouTube, you can see a space shuttle behind the gentleman from MIT. I didn't even know that. I lived that, Stacy, and we were certain it worked until the heat panels didn't work in January of 1986. Yeah, do we have a certitude that this stuff is going to work for NVIDIA or Microsoft or the other 14 names you follow?
I cover 10 names. Microsoft and some of the others are covered by my colleagues. Sure. I cover semiconductors. When you talk about work, like I don't understand what you mean. So the question here is, these models look really efficient, and the resources that were required to train them, look lower than what we've seen from some other models in the past. And then we can look at where they're actually pricing the stuff, and they're pricing it, and they're pricing it at levels that are quite a bit lower, where say OpenAI makes their models available if you want to go use them. And so the question is, given all of that, do you need fewer GPUs? Right. That's the big question, and fewer infrastructure build-outs and everything else. And so, I mean, just to talk about this, like, what have they done? Right. They've got two flavors of models. They've got something called V3, which is sort of like a chat model. It uses something called a mixture of experts that makes it very efficient. And they've got a reasoning model called O1, where they used reinforcement learning and some other techniques from the V3 base model to build rivals to, say, to OpenAI's O1 reasoning model. If you look at the why they're so efficient in terms of the training that they did and the compute resources they used to train the V3 models, it's very efficient. They compared it to, say, like Llama 405B, and it took roughly 10% of the compute resources to train it than Meta's Llama 405B did. However, the structure of the model that makes sense. It uses something called a mixture of experts. That's the whole point. Other mixture of experts models that are out there, take anywhere from, a 6 to 1/7 as amount compute resources. This is a good one. It was like 1/10 or even better than that. But I don't think it's a miracle. And you got to remember, I'm a semiconductor analyst. Like, for 50 years, costs in semiconductors got cut in half, like for every 2 years for 50 years. That was not a bad thing for semiconductor, man. That was a good thing. We all want adoption. To get adoption, we need lower costs. This is something called Jevons paradox, right? Like, increasing efficiency drives actually more demand, more net demand, not less demand. I'm a firm believer in that. I have a strong suspicion that if we can free up more compute resources, it will get used. Like, I don't think we're anywhere close to the end of compute needs for artificial intelligence. And we're going to need this, just given, the costs have been going up next year, right? We need this.
Paul, jump in here, but anytime anybody quotes William Stanley Jevons on the show, they get to come back.
They get to come back. Stacy, what do you expect to hear from the semiconductor companies that you cover in terms of their response to this news, whether it's NVIDIA or others?
Yeah, well, I mean, so we're in the middle of earnings season right now, so we'll see as they come out, right? But we forget the semiconductor companies for a minute. We've already seen like some of the other like responses, and you have to remember everything that we've seen DeepSeek doing. Like, I don't want to dismiss it. Like they're really good and very efficient. They're very smart engineers. But these are not things that are not known, and these are not things that like the other top tier AI researchers and AI labs are not aware of and potentially already using themselves, right? And if we look at what we saw last week on top of all of this, clearly spending is going up, not down. So Meta just significantly increased their capex, I think, on Friday, right? We had the whole Stargate announcement, $500 billion, whatever that is. And even China a few days ago announced a 1 trillion yuan, which is about $140 billion US, sort of like sovereign like AI effort, right? So like clearly spending is still going up, not down. And these models, like I said, they didn't just dump on us yesterday. The DeepSeek V3 was released the end after after Christmas.
Tracy, Stacy, I got to get this in. It's too important. At UCLA, you had to survive Physics 1A a few years ago. The smartest thing I've seen is that American AI is trying to go out to 32 decimal points, where the Chinese are saying, you know what? 8 decimal points is okay. Is this a question of granularity, or we're being too perfect in AI, and the Chinese are saying you don't need to be too perfect?
No, so they use they use mixed precision. They use mixed precision numbers to train this stuff. They use floating point 8-bit numbers. You typically use floating point 16 or floating point 32. It's actually really interesting. So in NVIDIA, with their Hopper generation, which is the H100 and the H800s, it has something called on it. It's actually called a transformer engine. Okay? What that actually did was it enabled you to train at 8-bit precision. And in fact, Blackwell, which is their next generation stuff that's coming on now, actually enables 4-bit precision. So no, these are things that everybody is looking at. It may be that DeepSeek is the first ones to actually deploy this in a very large model, but these are things that looking at. And if you actually look over time, we've seen the numerical precisions that people are using coming in. And by the reason you do this is you get more compute. If I go from 16-bit to 8, in theory, I get twice as many flops. Twice as many operations per second. But no, these are things that have been happening all along. This is just the next step. And they're, again, I don't want to dismiss them. Like I said, they've done some really clever things. But none of this is a miracle, and none of this, I think, is an unknown or a slap in the face to the other AI labs and researchers.
We're out of time. Don't be a stranger. You're a trooper to get up this early. Yep. Really, really appreciate it. He's in Los Angeles. Daily lunches at Michael's. They're closed now because of the fire.
Oh, is that right?
But I'm sure when Michael's reopens, Stacy will be there. Stacy Rasgon with Bernstein, definitive there. And that was a real clinic, folks. So about half of it went over my head, and the other half went over Michael Barr's head. But hey, that was brilliant. Stacy Rasgon with Bernstein there on this AI of the moment. I hope for Global Wall Street, you learn something there. I still got an improving tape. I don't want to make too much of this, but it's better. Negative 3.5% on the NASDAQ. The VIX back over 21.05. Paul, what's yield doing? It's a little better.
Yeah, yields are coming in a little bit, but they're better here. We're down about 9 basis points, 4.53% on your 10-year time.
I mean, we'll have to see. Thank you so much on your commutes on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts on YouTube. Good morning.
You're listening to Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. It is just a wild Monday. We knew it'd be a busy week. All that earnings coverage coming out as well. The politics of Washington. Joe Matthew, Kaylee Lyons, Balance of Power, 12 noon will be fine. I got up to Rolodex over the weekend, and I said, Paul, who's the one person we know that can spell Columbia and Columbia?
Oh, okay.
And that would be Isabel Lee, who darkened the door for Parchment and Morningside Heights. We're not going to talk to her about Columbia. We're going to talk to her about DeepSeek and, the tech stocks and all that. What's a single, Isabel Lee with us, I should say, what's a single desk observation right now about down 4% NASDAQ?
It's really NVIDIA. I think that's the story of the day.
It's a one stock story.
It's a one stock. No, it's a multiple stock story. NVIDIA plunged 4%. Earlier, it was down 12%. Yeah. But really, tech stocks, power stocks, everything is almost down. But one good news, China, Merit Interactive, it's massively up. It's the only stock that has a direct link to DeepSeek. But this really feels like it came out of left field.
Right. Is Apple involved?
Apple is edging slightly lower, but a lot of them are paring back gains. And with 30 minutes till the open, they might, 35 minutes, we might see some of these reverse course. I mean, NVIDIA's down just 4%. Earlier, it was 12%. Right. Can you imagine?
On surveillance, you can say 30 minutes when it's really 35 minutes because nobody's, this early in the morning, nobody's keeping score.
Isabel, it seems like, for a lot of folks, this could be a concern for the market in general because AI has been such a story for not just the tech stock, but for the market in general for the last couple of years, it seems like.
100%. And this calls into question the underpinnings of a tech rally that added $15 trillion to the NASDAQ since 2022. And it really just makes you think, did we need to spend that much CapEx, that much energy, that much power to get all of these high-flying tech stocks to the valuations they are in today, which is very stretched, only to have DeepSeek, with just a fraction of a cost, compete?
Yeah, but we had and NVIDIA rather, I think down 10% right now.
But remember, Tom, we had when Stacy Rasgon from Bernstein on, he also pointed out the point that AI might become, if it's a lower cost, more accessible. It kickstart the development even more. So I'm not sure how to
technically, I mean, I know you don't speak to Jess Metton, but technically, when you look at the equity markets, does this break resistance? Is there some technical ramification for the NASDAQ or the SPX going on right now?
We do speak to Jess. She's very nice. The equities and cross-asset people, they're friends. But yes, and this week is a big week because it's also the week where 4 out of 7 Magnificent 7 stocks will be reporting. And that doesn't even look well at this point because of the stretch valuations. But for now, it really remains to be seen. 37% of SPX market cap is also reporting. We have Bloomberg Intelligence.
37% this week?
Yes.
She's a font of wisdom. It's like Julian Emmanuel.
We have Bloomberg Intelligence data saying the group estimated to report a combined profit increase of 18% this year. That's down 30% from 2024.
So we have big tech companies reporting starting this week and into next week. What are we expecting there?
Apple, Microsoft, Meta, Tesla. They're expected to report an increase of profit 18%, which sounds great, but it's 34% down from last year.
Is there a whisper number? Come on.
Who knows? But it's also a high-stakes moment for Europe because around 21% of the stocks index are also reporting. It's just a big earnings season. And then everyone will just, I'm sure, be asking even Mark Zuckerberg, what does DeepSeek mean for Meta?
Our Facebook in this shop.
Yes.
Exactly, and here it's
Facebook in this shop.
Is it llama or llama? We spent the whole morning, Isabel.
Llama,
is it Meta llama or llama?
I think it's llama.
I'm going llama.
They're
going
not
llama.
Spanish.
In the Philippines, it's llama.
Llama, yeah, exactly.
It's llama.
Exactly.
I mean, okay. Isabel, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Can you come back?
If you have me back.
She usually gets in at 10 o'clock, so this is, hour and 5 minutes early as well.
Tom, Satya Nadella tweeted the Jevons paradox, which states that technological advances increase efficiency and reduce costs, raising demand enough that technology becomes a cheap, widely used commodity. I think that's kind of what we're going to hear from coming out of Silicon Valley over the next couple of days.
One of my heroes. We'll have
Jevons
to talk about Mr.
paradox.
Jevons here as well. Thank you for that. Right now, I got futures. Isabel Lee driving the market higher to a negative 3.4%. Okay, we're playing Philadelphia music, and we'll get a whole bunch of songs out in the next 2 weeks. But you got to start with Daryl Hall and John Oates, Fallen Philadelphia.
is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
I'm sorry, it's a boom economy, and that's what we're adjusting to.
Neither party seems to want to take on deficits at all.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. An eventful Monday, to say the least. Thank you for our team cranking it up Sunday evening on this major tech story. We start strong in this hour. Anurag Rana to join us in moments, expert on cloud and, of course, the redounding effects, I should say, across all of American technology. Mandeep Singh, kind enough to rejoin as well. We'll get to that in a moment. The VIX, 21.35. It's deteriorated a little bit in the last number of minutes. I mean, there's just no question about that. SPX futures at negative 129. Dow futures at negative 335, down 0.7%. The Dow has deteriorated over the morning, and the NASDAQ here at negative 3.5%. Not quite as ugly, I would say, as what we've seen. Let's get right to it. You need a market summary with the Bloomberg Business Flash from the Interactive Broker Studios. Lisa Mateo.
You got it. We have NASDAQ futures still taking a hit, down nearly 4%. It was down as much as 5% this morning. All over buzz surrounding Chinese AI startup DeepSeek's latest model being more cost-effective while running on less advanced chips. Now that's putting the broader tech sector on track for a $1 trillion wipeout. So we'll check in with NVIDIA, Broadcom, both down 10%. In Europe, you have ASML Holding falling 8%. Not just NASDAQ futures, though, we were talking about. S&P futures down 2%, 129 points. Dow futures down 0.7%, 336 points. The 2-year yield, 4.19%, down 7 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.53%, down 8 basis points. DeepSeek also triggering a global sell-off in riskier assets. We have Bitcoin down nearly 4%. Coinbase, you have down 3%. We go to crypto-related stocks. Mara Holdings down 4%. All comes ahead of this big week for tech earnings. Companies including Apple, Microsoft, which this morning are both lower as well. Now, it's the midst of all this. We do get some more earnings reports. We had AT&T. They did report fourth quarter results that topped estimates. Its shares are up about 3%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Thank you, Paul. I didn't go to you. I'm sorry. I was so urgent to get to the market. And Lisa, what's your observation so far this morning, Paul Sweeney?
No, I just think it's interesting, Tom. Here we're having a real question here about this the AI underpinning for these markets. Tom, it's been not just for the tech sector for the last couple of years, but really for the market overall. You think about all the companies in their earnings releases talking AI about businesses you didn't think would have an AI exposure, yet a lot of these companies are calling it out.
Right now, and joining us, and last night when this was blowing up, I said, get me Mandeep Singh. He'll join us in a bit here. But Anurag Rana joins us now from Chicago with a little different take than Mandeep, more on the cloud, more on the systems analysis, if you will, of these big companies. Anurag, thank you so much for joining. You don't do buy, hold, sell, but would you suggest the sell side will shift opinion today?
For the cloud providers, I don't think so, because as Paul just mentioned about the tweet from Microsoft CEO, he's probably a little bit happier because for him, if the cost curve goes down in the long run, and we don't know if that's going to happen, his adoption rate goes up and his capex goes down. So it's in a roundabout way. Now, we don't think there is going to be an impact on capex in the near term, but in the long run, if that just shifts, it helps their profitability. But more important to that, the enterprise, you could say, take rate on AI adoption goes up.
The theme this morning, Paul's been great about this, is like drunken sailors. From where, and Anurag, you're just world class at this. Are they drunken sailors in terms of CapEx, or is there a plan? Is there a sequence? Is there a pace to spending billions?
So one of the things, if you would say, is if this AI adoption curve, which is absolutely in infancy right now, the only thing we have seen is in the consumer world. If enterprises start to put this in their core applications, then they would need a lot more, you could say, firepower to run it. most of the things that we have discussed is people would not want to do this on their own premise. The bigger companies will, but most of them will go to a handful of cloud providers, and that would be Microsoft, AWS, Google, and then Oracle. So for all these companies to increase their capacity now, they're only seeing the orders, and based on that, they are expanding their data center footwork. The question is whether do they need the expensive chips to do with this, or can they run this with cheaper chips? And that's really, I think, the biggest discussion going to be over the next 12 months.
Anurag, like Tom has often want to say, my head is spinning here. Just since Friday, I've got a big tech company called Meta. I call it Facebook, given the IPO. We spent a lot of time thinking about that name in the ticker FB. They upped their capex from $50 billion to $65 billion, in large part on AI. Now I've got this DeepSeek thinking about, I can do this at a much lower cost. How do we square those two things?
Yeah, but one thing is for sure, this DeepSeek news of the paper has been out for a while. So it did get publicized over the last few days. But I'd be very surprised if Meta, AWS, and Microsoft did not know about this. It has been around for a while. So both of them, both Meta and Microsoft, talked about their capex last week after knowing this news. So, they have more, they're far smarter than I am when it comes to this. So if they're taking up their capex, there must be a real need for it.
What's it mean for Cupertino? They're having an early morning. They don't have lattes at Cupertino. They got something. Lisa, what's the thing with the green powder in it?
The matcha?
The matcha,
please,
yeah.
that is
Anurag, they're having the matcha at Cupertino, some undrinkable bilge. What are they saying at Apple today?
They are actually smiling and saying, you guys fight it out and tell me what's the best large language model out there. I'll just put it in my phone and I won't even pay for it. So if you look at Apple right now, that's kind of the safety haven for people is they're not spending that capex. If you look at that capex line, it hasn't moved at all in 2 years, and the free cash flow just keeps on coming. Their issue, honestly, is more so on the the growth side. They are having challenges in China. That needs to smoothen out over the next 12 months. Otherwise, this is going to be another year for them to grow only 4-5%. That's the big issue for them. Nothing to do with AI.
All right, well, let's just stay on the Apple story. Its stock's down 11% year to date this year. It's only up 15% over the trailing 12 months, which is radical underperformance for a company like Apple. Is there a bull case here short term for Apple?
In the short term, it's very difficult to come up with a bull case because as we talked about it even a few months ago, Apple Intelligence is not going to be out in other parts of the world. It's not out in China. And China is where they're struggling, honestly, at this point. And they need to come out and pacify investors that, we have a strategy in China. We will gain market share back. Otherwise, this is going to be another muted year for them. We think the next phone, which is the one that's coming out in September, I know that's far. I think that's the big catalyst. But that's that's 8 months out, 9 months out.
All right. Anurag Rana with us in Chicago right now. We welcome all of you on your commute across the nation. For those of you in the office, at home, on YouTube, thank you for being on YouTube today. Just brilliant live chat. I'm learning a lot from people smarter than me on the YouTube live chat this morning. Subscribe at Bloomberg Podcast. That's the best way to get to the show out there. This is a rare privilege, and for senior management listening on radio right now, we adhere to their policy, which is Anurag Rana and Mandeep Singh can never be in the same room together. It's too much risk to the franchise. But Paul, why don't you bring in Mandeep Singh as we talk to both Anurag Rana and Mandeep?
Mandeep Singh covers the technology space along with Anurag Rana. There are two leaders globally running our technology franchise, and it is a global franchise, analysts in Europe, Asia, and North America. Mandeep, I guess what we're hearing, Satya Nadella from Microsoft put out something that, hey, cost coming down is pretty natural for the technology space. That happens, and it's a good thing because it helps adoption. Does that make sense to you?
Well, clearly, I think the investor expectations were different, which is why you see this sort of stock reaction. So, yes, we have Moore's Law and we have other laws in terms of figuring out how the cost curve may look like over time. But clearly, this is a step change in terms of what you can do with the existing chips that are out there, as well as what you will need going forward. So I think this is a big moment in terms of just the efficiency that we can see with these chips and the kind of scale that is required for the next versions of these foundational models. But there is no doubt that this makes generative AI more accessible to software companies as well as, overall users.
Anurag, what do you think this means to, I know you guys at Bloomberg Intelligence, you have access to this IDC data, which is some of the best data on technology spending in the marketplace, and you guys feature that in your research. Is this going to change IDC's forecast of tech spending, AI spending, do you think?
So AI spending has been going up, Paul. We've talked about this a few times, but it's the other non-AI spending that has actually not done so well in the last 2 years. And over the next, I would say, month and a half, we will get a much clearer picture if corporations or enterprises are moving up their overall tech budgets or not. Because right now, AI spending is coming at the expense of areas such as, normal software or, just boring hardware upgrades or consulting. That really needs to pick up because a large portion of the tech ecosystem is some of those companies.
Mandeep, when I think of this news today, I'm like everybody else, our listeners and viewers are learning about DeepSeek and what it means. I can't help but think about TikTok. At some point, I feel like by the end of business today, we're going to have a story coming out of Washington. There's going to be an opinion coming from Washington as it relates to DeepSeek. Does it pose a similar risk, do you think, to TikTok from a regulator's perspective?
Well, it's still, the app is still, early in terms of adoption. And look, I'm sure it's got millions of users in East Asia and, China and whatnot. But I think when it comes to AI, consumers just look at the functionality and, the fact that they have an app which is accessible for free as opposed to paying $200 a month. True. They'll end up using it. So it's the same argument with TikTok. They will go with the functionality. They don't care about the privacy and the data.
Mandeep Singh with us, and Anurag Rana, we continue. Anurag, let's go to earnings. Let's like remove ourselves from DeepSeek. What is the character of the cloud mystery that you see into earnings season, Anurag?
Yeah, we are anticipating an improvement in growth rates for both Microsoft and AWS going in. In fact, Microsoft, we are hoping they come out and increase their guidance for Azure numbers for the next 2 quarters. They have been struggling with supply challenges where they are not able to fulfill the demand that's coming in their data centers. And if they give that signal, that should revive or pacify some of the fears that we are seeing right now in the market. Same thing for AWS. AWS has been talking about a recovery in consumption for their core business. We are looking forward to some comments on that as well from them. So I'm hopeful that both companies will come up with good numbers over the next 10 days.
But let's say it's not like Procter & Gamble. It's not a unit and price story at the revenue line. But where is the fear into earnings season, Anurag, on the income statement? Is it a margin fear, a revenue fear, or something I don't understand?
I think it's going to be a backlog/revenue fear more than the margins, because everybody understands this is a very unique business. When you have a fixed cost business like this, you can scale it up in the near term, but once you reach a mature phase, all the revenue comes back, or you can distribute that over a very large platform. That has been the case for cloud over the last 10 years. So in an expansion of capacity, people don't really see that as a big issue in the near term.
Mandeep, last Friday, Meta took their CapEx guidance from $50 billion, which was consensus, which was kind of guidance, up to $65 billion. I've never seen that before, in order of magnitude. What's going on there?
Well, and I guess they probably knew this DeepSeek advancement, so it's not as if they were caught off guard with the DeepSeek release. So they did it despite the the whole thing around DeepSeek. So to my mind, every company is doubling down on AI right now, even though we are talking about pricing compression and whatnot. But this is the moment where generative AI will be incorporated in all software, all applications, and every company wants a piece of it, so they don't mind spending more on CapEx.
The elephant in the room, Anurag, does the public want AI? Is there any interest that Lisa Mateo is waiting and waiting and waiting for AI?
See, the thing is, the consumers have already embraced it through ChatGPT, through Gemini, through Perplexity. But when you look at the enterprise use case, we are still in the building phase. And that's probably what this year is going to be like. Next year, we should see a much faster adoption by companies in terms of, and that usage will show up in cloud numbers. Right now, even when you look for somebody like a Microsoft, most of their AI revenue is from consumer app, which is basically OpenAI's ChatGPT.
So, all right, Tom, we'd like to talk to Anurag and
Do you
Mandeep.
feel like Ed Ludlow this morning?
No, you just.
I mean, we're like, this might
fire
as well be Bloomberg Tech.
Exactly.
You
I
know.
mean, just.
Can I get
from
the shoes with the white soles?
Yes.
I
That's
don't
what
have the, I
even
mean,
David Weston
Mandy,
has that.
Do you
So
have
I,
shoes with the white
No.
soles? No.
No, he's a
Anurag,
player.
are you wearing shoes with the white soles?
No, I don't.
Old school. Old school.
Okay, old school.
And Tom, Mandeep and Anurag, they're pretty good, but the research, the real investment research on this whole DeepSeek Chinese AI, Robert Lee.
Yes, Hong
He's
Kong.
our Bloomberg Intelligence analyst in Hong Kong. So folks who have access to the Bloomberg terminal, go there because Mandeep and Anurag,
What's he say?
they're just.
What's he say?
He was out with research a couple of months ago on this, and he says, "Hey, this stuff is there."
Okay,
They're a
well, go
player.
that, Mandy. Lee in Hong Kong was way out front of this. Why are we stunned this morning?
Well, because he didn't pound the table in terms of saying like.
But I mean,
Throwing
it's
this
an
guy
industry.
under the table.
We're negative. What are we? Negative 3.5% on the Nasdaq right now. What? I mean, let's bring it back to.
I'm putting
7 o'clock
Robert on a
a.m.
plane, Tom,
What
today,
happened?
bringing him over to New York.
Like, what happened? Why were we surprised by this?
No, I don't think we were surprised because open source has been talked about a lot. We have been talking about how companies are looking to, drive scaling at inference time and how pricing was a constraint. And so, look, this is the way the industry was headed. It's just that DeepSeek came out with a long paper that describes what they did in detail, and everyone else is kind of closed source. So being open source has its advantages, and that's what we are seeing with DeepSeek here.
So the barriers to entry here, Anurag, just in general on AI, are the barriers to entry low for AI?
I think that's exactly what this paper that Mandeep is alluding to is talking about, that you and I can go out and build some of this thing without much capital. Now, the question is, how are you going to distribute it? And which is why I go back to the cloud providers, that those are the guys who are going to work with enterprises to embed some of this technology. If you look at somebody like an AWS, they work with all these providers. They work with Meta's Llama model or Anthropic's Claude models. So it's really up to the customer which model they choose, or sometimes they would reroute the inquiry based on what's better for that particular question. So it's really the distribution. What I'm saying is the value here, which takes us back to the cloud providers and also to Apple.
This has been fun. Anurag Rana, you're a trooper to get up this early. In Chicago, Anurag Rana with Bloomberg Intelligence and Mandeep Singh. Can we say, on behalf of all of us, Mandeep, thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, we'll try not to do it 3 times tomorrow. Maybe once, or maybe we'll see you Wednesday or whatever. Mandeep Singh and Anurag Rana is what the show's about, just world class on technology. Got to get to it right now. The VIX is out to a worse 21.58. Some tension is shown in the VIX. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Investors were rattled over the weekend after President Trump announced sweeping tariffs on Colombia for not allowing military planes full of deported migrants to land, only to reverse the threat hours later after he said a deal had been made. We get more from Bloomberg's Rosalind Matheson.
And he did this very quickly in response to Colombia saying we're not going to let these military planes carrying deportees land in our country. In a flash, Trump said, fine, I'll put tariffs on you. And we can see that he's going to be very reactive then on the tariffs front.
Bloomberg's Roz Matheson. Tens of thousands of Palestinians are streaming into the most heavily destroyed part of the Gaza Strip after Israel lifted its closure of the north for the first time since the early weeks of the 15-month war with Hamas. That was in accordance with a fragile ceasefire. Massive crowds of people walking with their belongings stretched along a main road running next to the coast today. Palestinians who have been sheltering in squalid tent camps and schools turned shelters for over a year are eager to return to their homes, but many have been likely damaged or destroyed. Storm preparations were underway in the Palisades community over the weekend as rain brings the renewed threat of landslides and toxic debris runoff. Los Angeles ordered the installation of more K-rails to place around scorched areas, and people began filling up sandbags to try and slow the rain runoff. Los Angeles Fire Department Captain Eric Scott.
The rain can come down and not have the typical leaves to slow it down, so the impact on the ground itself is more intense.
Flood watches were also in effect for burn areas from the fires. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
And this is Michael Barr. Thanks so much. I mean, I feel like the tech show. It's like all we've done today.
Exactly.
What does Brian Belsky think of this? What does Cam Dawson think of this? What does someone more cautious like David Rosenberg think of this?
I mean,
we've done tech.
Right. I mean, again, you see, we've been talking about maybe there needs to be a little bit of a pullback in this market, if for no other reason than for a healthy bull market, you need some drawdowns from time to time.
I'll
Maybe
let
this will
you
be a
say
little bit
that.
of it. We'll see.
Negative 3.6% on the NASDAQ. And the VIX, I mean, you get closer to 930, we're 10 minutes away. You get a better VIX, 21.65. That's 6.80 big figures. And, I guess the Dow, negative 0.8% on the Dow, very much different than the tech challenges that we see today. And I mean, Damien Sassower coming up, that's wonderful.
Yeah, he doesn't know DeepSeek.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this futures report sponsored by IBKR. Will U.S. oil production exceed 13.61 million barrels per day for November 2024? You can trade your prediction with the IBKR Forecast Trader. The yes was recently at 35%. Buy yes or no and earn $1 if you're right. Go to ibkr.com/forecast. All right, we've got NASDAQ futures continuing to get beat up right now, down about 3.5%, although not as bad as earlier when they were down as much as 5%. But it all coming after Chinese startup DeepSeek and its cheaper AI model really put Silicon Valley into a deep panic. We have NVIDIA shares down 12%, Broadcom down 10%. Then on the flip side, you have shares of Chinese tech firms, ties to DeepSeek's business model. They're rallying. TRS Information Tech up 17%. We have Merit Interactive up 20%. So we hit NASDAQ futures. Let's go to S&P futures, down 2%, 136 points. Dow futures down 0.8%, 379 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.19%, down 7 basis points, and the yield on the 10-year 4.53%, down 8 basis points. Want to end with company news because UBS, sources saying it started cutting jobs in Switzerland, affecting hundreds of employees across different locations. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. Wherever you get your podcasts, I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Thanks so much. Greatly appreciated. He wouldn't know what to do with a computer at home. No. Mrs. Sassower is the one that has to get Damien teched up and all that. We're going to move away from DeepSeek right now.
Thank you.
And actually have an intelligent conversation here on Colombian peso COP strength.
Okay.
And out it goes, and it came back a little bit, but I'm sorry. The Colombian peso's telling me this was all noise this weekend. What does the rest of the Damien Sassower EM space say?
Colombia exports to the U.S. 40% petroleum, fresh cut flowers. That's what
11% coffee.
A lot of coffee there. You're right.
What does Colombia export to the U.S.?
It's petroleum's 40% of their exports to the U.S. Right, but the U.S. accounts for 25% of Colombia's total exports. I mean, they have a $1.7 billion current account deficit. A lot of fresh cut flowers, precious metals, coffee, tea. Tom says that's That's 75% of the equation there. But they actually, look, it's the best performing currency writ large in the whole of the 31 currencies, G10 and EM right now. And
why?
And look, they're going to be cutting rates at the end of this week, so go figure, right? I mean,
what did you learn here about the future of the Damien Sasser EM space?
I think this DeepSeek move, this risk-off move, this VIX at 21 and change, tell me why the dollar's off in this move, right? Shouldn't the dollar be rallying in a risk-off move? The euro-dollar is now at a 105.20 handle. I mean, that's what stands out to me right now. So if you have to kind of call a spade, maybe you're looking at the fact that some of these central banks, 5 of the 9 that are announcing this week, are all going to be cutting rates, and yet the dollar is off. Something's amiss there.
Sebastian from, is it
Medellin?
Says, don't forget Colombian emeralds. Mrs. Sassower's got
and pearls,
two
precious
carat
stones,
on her
pearls.
ring. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, we're learning so much here. What did we learn in your world, emerging markets, about? It just seems like a country, you name it, Colombia, could just be pulled out of thin air, and then that is front and center for currency traders, for bond traders in the emerging markets. How do you guys think about all that stuff?
Well, you look at the currencies that are off year to date, and those are the countries that have been cutting in the face of a Fed that could be on hold for longer, and that would be like, for example, the Indonesian rupiah or the Indian rupee, or even the Philippine peso to a lesser extent.
Indonesian what?
The Southeast Asian bloc, Paul. And so basically, the way I look at it is, of those 21 EM currencies, those are 3 of the 4 that are down, let's call it. And now you look at Colombia. Colombia and South Africa are both going to be cutting rates at the end of this week. I wonder what their currencies do, right? How much room for dollar weakness does this market really have?
Right.
The dollar bears are winning they're winning right now in what is a risk-off move worldwide. I mean, what's the number? I just heard $1 trillion in market cap is being blown off the tech sector here in the U.S. I mean, talk to me. I mean, something's amiss here.
Damien, help me here before we get to the market opening with the idea of EM and the president. How are they watching 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue?
Friends of Trump trades. So Argentina, Hungary. I mean, look at some of these markets. Look at their EM dollar bonds. Look at their currencies.
The Hungarian forint has rallied.
Yeah, of course, because Viktor Orban is, obviously a friend of Trump. You look at Malay in Argentina, friend of Trump. The friend of Trump trades are working.
Right.
And this is just another one, the newest of the lot, right? The Colombian peso.
I didn't have time to get to your people. Can you stay around till after the bell? Okay, Damien Sassower with us here. We'll get to what matters in a moment. Let me review the tape. We were negative 4% hours ago, now negative 3.6% on the NASDAQ. The VIX has worsened. It was a 21, then out to a better number, a 20-point X, and it's now back to 21.45. A little bit of angst there with the VIX up 6.60 points. The markets, the SPX off 2%. Standard & Poor's off 132 points as well. In the bond space, and again, I just use the 10-year real yield. It's come back. It was 2.20 down to 2.10. It's a little bit better, 2.12%. So that gets us there. We need a major shout out. Thank you to particularly Isabel Lee for dropping by this morning on the equity markets. And that, of course, means that we've got to get to a fractious Monday opening. I have no idea how she looks at the first print. Here is Lisa Mateo.
Yeah, this DeepSeek AI story really impacting the markets. On the first trading day of the week, this is how we kick things off. So right now, I want to start with the S&P 500 because it's off and running down more than 2%, 138 points, 5,965. We get to the Dow down 0.6%, 304 points, 44,135. And finally, here comes the NASDAQ down more than 3.5%, 713 points, 19,245. So we go to the 2-year yield, 4.19%, down 7 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.53%, and that's down 8 basis points. We haven't talked much about commodities. Brent crude, $78 a barrel. WTI crude, $74 a barrel. We have spot gold, $2,748 an ounce. Then, yes, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index. Damien talked about this. It is little changed right now. And finally, DeepSeek story triggering a global sell-off in riskier assets. So I want to point out Bitcoin down nearly 4% at just over 100,000 at the open, though. Have to check in with Nvidia down 12% and Broadcom down 13%. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Yen through 155 to a stronger yen 154. We'll continue to monitor this. The Dow negative 179. Nobody cares. Okay, ball control. The Eagles have to like sit on the ball and keep it away from his worship, right?
Tom, defense wins championships, right? Isn't that what we always say here?
In baseball, it's true. In hockey, it's true. Is it true in the NFL? 55 points. Defense really worked there.
Look, I happen to think it was a lot of turnovers. Defense wins championships in both games. And so, look, for me, I think, it's going to be Casey's to lose here. I think they're 1.5-point favorites, the early line here. I think the over and under is like 50 points, so it's going to be another high-scoring affair. But I think the Casey defense is underrated. I know Philly's got the top-ranked D in the NFL, but it's tough to bet against Mahomes and Andy Reid. They are just so good. The game management, the lack of penalties, turnover ratio.
In winning 3 in a row is a huge deal.
Yeah.
It hasn't happened, right?
Think of the people
You
that
can't say
tried.
three-peat on air. Somebody patented that, right? Isn't that Pat Riley?
Is that right?
I think so, right?
Okay,
I remember that.
3 in a row.
Three-peat.
Very good.
Three-peat.
But you got Saquon on the other side.
Madison Keys, are we talking about the Australian Open, number 14 in the world? Madison Keys in a huge upset. Huge upset.
Describe that, please.
Well, was it Arena? I can't pronounce her name.
That's
okay.
Yeah,
Surveillance.
She's the Belarusian. She is the number 1 in the world, and we got an American up there who won.
How did she beat her from number 14? That's amazing.
Yeah, no, she's an athlete. She is number 14 in the world. She's an excellent player, but I didn't see the match. I just saw the outcome and I saw some highlights, and she looked great. What are you going to do? Who else? Who was it? Jannik Sinner?
He won again. 3 straight sets. All right. We're going to get February 1st, I think, if you listen to President Trump, some tariff potentially on our 2 big trading partners, Canada and Mexico. What do you see in your market?
Is this like an opportunity because of DeepSeek for Damien Sassower?
I don't want to comment on my personal account here, Tom, but what I'll say is, look, I listen to people like Bruce Kasman and Joe Lupton at J.P. Morgan, and they're looking for anywhere from between a 10 to 20% probability now of a rate hike really? By the Fed this year. 10% is kind of where Kasman is, 28, 25 is where Joe Lupton is, but it's front-loaded, meaning if it's going to happen, it's going to happen in the beginning of the year, which means this earnings season, this week, Paul Sweeney, this is your week, is a huge week. We've got energy at the end of the week. It's supposed to be weak. We've got industrials all over the place, GM, Starbucks, UBS, everything, Boeing, Apple, Microsoft, Tesla.
Right.
You tell me, it's supposed to be a weaker earnings season, right? And if that starts to weigh on, some of these numbers, anyone's guess.
What do you write about Bogota this morning? What do you write about Colombia, Damien Sassower? With great respect, I should say.
I'm going to be writing about the whole of EM currencies. Again, 26 of 31 currencies, not just EM, but G10 are up versus the dollar this year. That's big news. EM credit is up for its 3rd year in a row already. Out of the gates, pretty strong, although I think it's tough. I think if we have a real equity market correction here, financial conditions are going to tighten in the U.S. There's potential for slippage with this whole data center thing into the real estate market, which would cause spreads to rise. And, there's gap risk in credit spreads. We are at all-time tights across IG and high yield in the U.S. and EM.
Okay.
So I'm just looking at all that stuff.
Great. Damien, thank you so much.
Nobody cares.
He's on here like live chat. And all that matters is they're doing tennis talk on live chat because of Damien. I guess we got a headline.
Nvidia shares down 11.3%. They were down 13% earlier.
They said 13%.
So it's a major move, as we saw, erasing $465 billion in market value. Wow.
We'll talk. We'll have to see on that. Damien Sassower, thank you so much. Really treasure to have you in here each and every day. The Dow, -150. Stay with us worldwide on your commute on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We'll talk about a rough start to the week, all over concerns that a cheaper AI model from China-based DeepSeek could threaten U.S. tech dominance. We'll start with NASDAQ right now, down nearly 3%, 587 points. The Dow down 0.1%, 69 points. The S&P 500 down more than 1.5%, or 99 points. The two-year yield of 4.20%, down 6 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.54%, down 7 basis points. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little changed. Now, we talked about NVIDIA. Those shares still down about 11%, erasing $465 billion in market value. Broadcom also lower, too, down 10%. But you also have AI stocks like Palantir, down 6%. Super Microcomputer, down 9%. AI infrastructure-related stocks like ARM Holdings, down 8%. And Oracle, down about 9%. All comes ahead of a big week for tech earnings from companies like Apple and Microsoft. We have Apple right now up about 1.5%, but Microsoft down nearly 4%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks. Just world-class data check. Thank you so much, Lisa. It's a blur here, and I can't tell you how hard it is to do this at 9:40, and particularly what she does at 9:31. It's just one of the hardest things to do as it ramps up on the Bloomberg. The relative here is important. We had a market reversal. The VIX was a 21 level, comes into 20, and is now a better 19.45. By far the best VIX of the day, given the carnage that we've seen. We get lucky. Joe Weisenthal has done so much for Bloomberg, I should say for business journalism, and of course his work here at Bloomberg with Tracy Alloway. But one of the great things is Paul, I'm like AI, EIO. Joe's actually doing it.
Nobody
he said,
does it, but
he looked at the summer tour of light sweet crude and said, I can't do the light sweet crude analysis without AI. 3 days ago, you nailed DeepSeek. You're using it at home.
Yeah.
What's the experience of DeepSeek?
So I'll just say there are two main takeaways for me. One is, I have never experienced any technology in the history of any tech, computers, apps, whatever, that have a zero switching cost the way AI chatbots have.
Really?
I used ChatGPT for a long time. Claude came out, the one from Anthropic. I was like, oh, this works too.
Have you used Gemini?
I've used Gemini. No, for some reason, that one hasn't stuck as much. But then DeepSeek came out, and I saw the chatbot last week online, and I was like, I'm going to try this out. It took me 30 seconds to register, and I was like, this is just as good as what I'm getting from ChatGPT. I ask it random things during the day, and what strikes me is like, there's just zero
Is it appropriate for radio? Can we ask what you ask?
It's all, I ask it random historical questions or linguistic. I'm interested in linguistics.
Like, why did Texas lose to Ohio State?
No, I can't. Michigan? That's too painful. No, I don't ask that. But then the other thing is, I made a 2025, one of my New Year's, resolutions.
Yep.
I've never coded. I said, I'm going to try and code something with AI.
Really?
One of my goals, yeah. And so I started building a little software by just asking it create this code. And I was able to plug my app that I'm building on my home, it's a little linguistics app, into the DeepSeek API. And it's like a fraction of the cost of what I use for the OpenAI API. So I just played around with it. I was like, wow, here's this thing that seems just as good as ChatGPT.
What this guy's
Sorry, here's this thing that seems just as good as ChatGPT.
Can you have a sip of your mimosa? Yeah.
So it's like, I'm not surprised that
All right, the dumb question are we not using Google anymore because of this
No,
stuff?
I still, well, look. It is, I still use Google all the time. I still use Wikipedia all the time. There are just different types of...
But what's your initial go-to? Oh, I need to know about this.
It really depends on the context, I gotta say. I really like using AI for things like understanding a term within a specific context or something like that, or something. But you don't know if it's true, so I always do a backup. I see something and then I say, oh, look at Google. It's like, is this actually true or whatever?
Morgan Brown, Dropbox, Imperial Double E. He's out with the smartest note I've seen where he's talking about decimal points. I don't want to go into that. You and Tracy at Outlets talk a lot more to techie people about this. What's their message on the future of American AI versus these shock threats?
I mean, here's what my take, which is that they're already. I mean, we saw the Trump announcement last week with Stargate, right? $500 billion.
I thought that was the movie with the Spader.
Well, what's happening now, I think, because of the arrival of this very compelling Chinese model, is it just cements the notion that there is a global arms race a la the bomb. And I don't know if achieving AGI or whatever people talk about is a breakthrough on par or as strategic as a nuclear bomb. But now everyone is just going to be, we have to beat them, we have to beat them. And there's going to be so much money flowing to tech companies now in this idea that there is a global race.
Joe, I feel like by the end of business today, the top story on the Bloomberg Terminal will be U.S. government looking at DeepSeek as it's looking at TikTok.
Well, you know, so this is interesting. The other thing, and thanks for reminding me of this, which is that DeepSeek is a piece of open source software. It's unbannable. Now there is an app that theoretically could be banned from the App Store, but I think it would be hard. But it's a piece of open source software. Okay. I have a friend. You know, you can run it on your own computer if you have the. And so this is fundamentally different from TikTok in the sense that anyone can run this piece of code, just download it, and so it's fundamentally unbannable.
You've been on fire. Adam Tooze this weekend raving about your Eurodollar three-part series. You have Howard Marks on. Good morning, Mr. Marks. Thank you so much for your support over the years. What's your message from Howard Marks about this odd market?
He doesn't think we're in an AI bubble yet. He said, you know, he
doesn't see the exuberance.
He doesn't see, which I thought was really interesting, because to me it feels like exuberance, but the idea of me questioning Howard Marks on questions like what is exuberance really feels like someone who has experienced multiple cycles over the years.
Right.
I don't think I would go with my take versus his take.
Okay. Did you go to NAMM? Were you out in Anaheim?
No, but one of my bandmates was.
Well, I mean, the endorsements Light Sweet Crude has. Should I go with the Gretsch Pink Ranger Penguin?
Yeah, you got it.
I mean, it's got the Fishman pickups.
You got it.
I mean, it's $5.49 at Sweetwater. I'll tell Mrs. Keene it's $1.49.
Buy it right now.
It's like you got to.
It's free.
And it's pink.
Yeah. I mean, is that done? The Jeff Beck auction?
Oh, yeah, they did the auction.
That's done? Okay.
Joe bid. But I'm sorry, Gretsch is on fire.
You got to get
Gretsch is on fire.
Yeah, that's the real breakthrough.
Fender bought Gretsch, and, you know.
There you go.
What's Light Sweet Crew doing? You're playing?
We have a show this Wednesday, the 11th Street Bar in Manhattan. It's free, 8 o'clock. East Village. Everyone should come out. We're gonna play some new songs.
Are you really I'm in bed at 8:30. Does it really start at 8, or are you doing the rock star thing?
We have an opening act at 8. We're gonna be on just after 9. But you
just after midnight.
Just come out. It's one night. It's one night.
Yeah, but I'll be brain dead the next morning.
59th Street. I don't think so.
You have one off day the next day.
Okay. So you got Howard Marks coming up on Odd Lots.
It's out today. Check it out.
Oh, okay. Joe Weisenthal.
Great.
Thank you so much. And really, folks, follow Joe, the stalwart on Twitter, and also follow Joe on LinkedIn, where he's really going step by step through his experience with AI, which I think is really cool. I mean, who do you know that's doing this?
I feel like I've got Google. What else? Now, the Google throws Gemini at me now in all my queries.
Yeah, but I always concerned if it's what Joe was saying. Like, can you trust it? But he always has it fact checked, you know, when he kind of goes on some of these. Can you trust?
So is our future? This is really important. Yeah. Is our future where these big American names are going to sell that you can trust them versus shocks like DeepSeek?
Yeah, I mean, this is a technology Cold War on being fought on many fronts between, it seems like, China and the West. It just feels like how it's unfolding. I don't know.
Let me give you a market coverage here. I really want to just focus here. The 10-year real yield, yes, doing better, 2.14%. And you see it in the equity tape. The VIX now under 19, 18.98, remarkably superior to the 21 angst of 2 hours ago. SPX negative 1.6%, SPX down 99 points. Dow was, I think, negative 350, now negative 150. And the NASDAQ, negative 4%, is now negative 2.7%. And, you know, I don't have the percent here. Sai, help me out here with percents on NVIDIA. Apple up $4.70, $2. It's not a big move, but it's green. And NVIDIA down 11% seems to be the angst.
Yeah, but Apple, you're just saying, hey, they're going to use AI on their devices So you're telling me it's going to be cheaper for Apple to use that stuff? Boom.
Thank you. Out on the YouTube live chat today, some really smart perspective there that helped out. Like one guy said on Apple that they're going for perfection, not for invention, which I thought really captured the zeitgeist maybe of Cooper. Dollar weaker. Thank you, Damian Sassower, for that. Dollar weaker here this morning. But again, the major message, folks, worldwide is the angst of 3 hours ago dissipates. On YouTube, on Apple CarPlay, from New York, Bloomberg Surveillance.
You're listening to Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for being with us. We have an improved tape. The NASDAQ negative 4% is now under 3, negative 2.7%. The VIX under a 19 goes from 21.XX down to 18.80. Major shout out. Wonderful to hear from Abby. We'll leave it at that. But Abby with a lovely note this morning on the team effort here, a conversation on technology. We now go to surveillance. Eagles correspondent. He was up all night. Eric Belchunas joined us. Lincoln Financial Field, and then everybody just moved out onto the street.
Yeah, I live right off Broad. So when we won 5-6 years ago, I went out there. It was nothing like it. But we love to celebrate. So there were people streaming down Broad Street just to win the NFC Championship. Wasn't quite as intense as the Super Bowl celebration a few years ago, but I think our NFC Championship celebration is as good or better than most cities' Super Bowl celebration. That's how maniacal we are about. And the Eagles are the team in Philly. The Sixers and the Phillies are good, but nothing like the Eagles for that town birds.
Like you, there's a certain rudeness to Philadelphia. You see that with Philly baseball. They all stand up and they're
hard on the outside, soft on the inside.
Can you
Tom.
carry that? Listen to that. Can you carry that enthusiasm over to an away game at a Super Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, look, we lost by one ref call in the other Super Bowl 2 years ago against the Chiefs, and we are bloodthirsty. And it is time. We now have Saquon.
Yes.
That's different.
Penn State.
Now, the other thing is, I think we have America, too. America is so tired of the refs giving the calls to Mahomes. They're tired of the State Farm commercials. They're tired of Taylor Swift looking way too surprised for every little 30-yard catch. They are ready for us to topple the dynasty, Tom.
We got to go over, and they're in my ears. Talk to them about ETFs. Did the luxury ETF go up because Taylor Swift or Louis Vuitton heads to toe at the game?
It's not that sensitive. No. The ETFs aren't that connected. Yeah, okay.
All right, what are you guys talking about in the world of ETFs these days?
So look, we talk about the sell-off. We know the markets are up a lot, and it's not going to take a lot to have a little sell-off. So one thing we do in these days when it looks a little scary out there is we always look at our indicator of the ETFs used by Vanguardian-type investors. And those are seeing inflows. And so we like to call it the Vanguard bid. And so I think in these sell-offs, what you want to do is look at, okay, SPY, the Q is probably going to see a little outflows, people taking profits. That's a trader money. But the retail money continuing to go in. And one way we can track this that's a link to a bigger story in my world is VU. VU is the Vanguard S&P. It is a mere $7 billion away from toppling SPY. Speaking of dynasties going down. And SPY was the biggest ETF for 31 years running. GLD was bigger for one day, but I won't count that. Anyway, when VU takes over, it's going to be the biggest ETF. Vanguard 500 has taken in $20 billion this year. year to date. That's over $1 billion a day. Wow. So if you're out there, one thing about the passive thing, people are like, oh, passive, is it hurt? Passive is a bid when the going gets tough. So I do think that when you see this kind of news flow, the traders are going to maybe get spooked and reallocate a little. But that Vanguard bid, to me, right now looks solid as ever.
The Vanguard bid, I like that. So, all right, so that's coming into the market. What's the cool thing you're working on right now? You got 30 seconds. The cool thing.
The cool thing. Well, it's a good question. Okay, I want to go back to uranium again, but look, I'm just going to throw this out. There are going to be about 20 altcoin ETFs probably approved in the next 6 months. They filed for everything under the sun: XRP, Solana, even a Trump coin and a Doge ETF could be actually approved. Hester Peirce, will she allow it? This is what we're tracking lately. It'll be interesting.
20 seconds. There's got to be a Forpal leveraged NVIDIA ETF. How will you observe that today?
Yeah, NVDL. Look for a lot of volume in this. This is already a top 15 most traded ETF. 2x NVIDIA. It's like $5 billion somehow. There's also an inverse version. So I would see that one getting a lot of action. So, these leverage ETFs.
NVIDIA's down 11% today, and this Granite share 2x long, it's down 22%.
Well, there's another one up 22.
Okay, Eric, thank you so much for Eagles Wisdom. Thank you. Major shout out to our team led by Brockton, blowing up the show starting last night. Thank you for the many, many comments as well. We played Philadelphia. There's only one song about Kansas City. This from Mr. Domino.
Kansas City, here I come. They got some cream.